Hey everyone, guess what? We do not have ugly swag. We have spaced out radio gear that you're going to want to wear. Why? Because no one wants to wear ugly clothing. So head on over to spacedoutradio.com and go shopping today. You'll be glad you did. And it's a great way to support our show. Once you get your gear, send us a picture of you rocking out in your SOR swag. spacedoutradio.com, shop there today, and make yourself look good.
Welcome, everyone, to Spaced Out Radio After Hours, the After Hours radio show. You know, we're going to go ahead and get it in tonight. Happy Saturday to everybody there. Let me go ahead and hop in the chat so I can see who got the medal positions tonight. Let's take a look here. Looks like we got Race Fan with the gold tonight. Awesome. Thanks for coming in, Race Fan. We got Robert Lamar Jr. coming in saying hello with the silver. And then we got Matt Carter coming in with that bronze saying good evening, Rob and Race Fan. Hope you both have a great weekend. Same to you as well. We got Kitty Catty Whack. Kitty Catty Whack is here in the building tonight. We're going to have an awesome show. We have microbiologist Wild Trees. We've had them on the show before. We had an awesome conversation. It was a must that we had to go ahead and bring them back. And it's going to be awesome tonight as well. Flat Six is here saying good evening, Spaced Out Radio. Hey, Flat Six. Thanks for coming on in. Melvin WD40 getting us lubed up to get in the show. That's what he's doing. And he's here tonight. Appreciate you showing on up. We got Queen Peachy Keen D. It's a tongue twister, but I said it right this time. Throwing it down and keeping it lit. That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Let's go. Aloha Dave 13 saying buenas noches a todo de Mexico. Good evening to everyone from Mexico. Aloha Dave always keeps us bilingual, and we appreciate that. We got Eternity Eternal saying hi, Rob G. We got Super Crazy Movie Geek saying, what place am I? Alien Head. You are at Spaced Out Radio After Hours, the radio show. Let's see, who else do we have? We have Operation Shutdown. Happy Saturday to Mr. Rob G and the SOR family. Same to you, Operation Shutdown. Thanks for coming on in. Algaray saying just came from the gym, ready for SOR. I need to go to the gym after hours tonight, right? Go to the gym after hours. Wow. Yeah, that's the thing. I might have to do that. Appreciate you coming on in. Lil Cam 51 over there on Twitch said KC beat Baltimore by a toenail last week. Looking forward to the game tomorrow. You know me, I'm all about my Dallas Cowboys. We got Eve in the building. We got Jeff Garvey is here as well. Let's go ahead and get ready to get this thing started on the radios. Well, actually the podcast side first, then the radio side. So let's get that started. Welcome everyone on the podcast side to Spaced Out Radio After Hours radio show with me, your host, Mr. Rob G. We're going to have an awesome show tonight. We have Wild Trees in the building, microbiologist. We're going to talk the phenomena. We're going to talk about things that make you go, definitely. And we're gonna have a great time tonight. You know we always do, and we're gonna just do it again tonight. We got coming in at the buzzer. We have Shaq Valet. Can't do it without Shaq Valet. Saying first, we got Corey saying, "You the man, Mr. Rob G." You the man, Corey. Straight up, you the man. We got. I think that's it for now. Yep, that's it for now. We know they'll be trickling on in as we get into this awesome conversation, guys. I can't wait. I love to do things like this. So we'll have Wild Trees for hour 1 and hour 2, and then in hour 3, we'll get some Steve Stockton, want some weird news, and maybe a little segment that I've just created in the moment. Nina Williams, thanks for coming in as we get ready to start the radio side. Here we go. Greetings, space travelers. Welcome home. You've just tuned your dial to Spaced Out Radio, the only place where you can own the night. I am your host, Mr. Rob G, and tonight we're broadcasting on our terrestrial affiliates across North America and digitally all around the world. You can access our archives for free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. And while you're there, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and X at Spaced Out Radio and at Spaced Out Radio Show. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where the options are endless. You can stay up to date with the SOR Newswire, get some official Spaced Out swag, plus rock out to the guy you hear right there, Mr. Bumblefoot, and oh, so much more. Like I said, awesome show tonight. We got microbiologist, Wild Trees. We're going to be talking phenomena. How does this apply for hours 1 and 2? Then hour 3, we're going to have Steve Stockton coming in with missing persons mysteries. And we're going to have the UFO weird news. And then a segment that I created, and it's really for my channel, my personal channel. It's kind of controversial, and it's called Unapologetically Mr. Rob G. So got a couple things to say here, and we're going to go ahead and get ready to jump into the show. So let me go ahead and set the stage for our guests for tonight. So let me go ahead and flip over our graphic as well and give the introduction. We have Wild Trees, who is a field biologist with expertise in microbiology and animal behavior. His research has taken him to diverse locations, including Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, Arkansas, Texas. He has published his work in academic journals and presented at numerous conferences. You can find more of his insights on his YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@biologistwildtrees. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move aside right here and bring our guest in for the night. None other than the man, Mr. Wild Trees. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm great. Hello, everybody who's listening as well. How are you doing, Rob?
Doing good, man. So good to see you again. And I'm saying that because last time we couldn't get you on camera, but now we got you with your nice cowboy hat. You're looking dapper, man. Looks like you're ready to get into this conversation tonight, man. So absolutely. I do appreciate you coming. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do this. For those who didn't get to see the first show, which it is in our archives, by the way, youtube.com/@spacedoutradio. You can catch the first episode where we had this conversation, but we're going deeper tonight. And yeah, so if you wouldn't mind starting out with what led you to be a microbiologist, and maybe phenomena, if you had any encounters as a child or, up until this point.
Sure. So the first thing about microbiology, basically when I was a little boy, I was just drawn to like living animals, and I still am, I love all animals. I don't care what you look like. I love every animal that has ever lived in the past, is living right now, or in the future will live. I just like them. So as a kid, I was just curious. I would see a different animal, like a lizard, and I'd be like, well, look at his eyes, look at his skin. I would see a squirrel, I would see a bear, that all those differences in life just really interested in me. And so I always had that drive for biology since I was really little. And then what got me into microbiology was when I went to university. My friend recommended I look for like employment at the university at a research lab. And it just so happens that the labs that we're hiring were microbiology labs. And so I just took to it really easily. And as a biologist, I like microbiology because, well, specifically, I study invertebrate life, a lot of insects, water bears, also known as tardigrade, but basically small life. And that's good as a biologist because you want to be able to easily manipulate and find your study subject or your organism. So like, as an example, if I were to study, killer whales, which are actually dolphins, not whales, but killer whales, very cool, right? Super impressive. But, I'd have to go to certain places. It'd be expensive and they're big. So it would limit my research. And whereas studying microbiology, like there's literally insects everywhere you go. So that's why I kept up with the microbiology. Now, when I was a little boy, as far as paranormal, if you grew up in North America, you may have a similar experience. So in the libraries, the librarians always had a small little section of books that were weird, like Bermuda Triangle, aliens, Bigfoot. I remember spontaneous human combustion. I don't know why the librarians did it. I mean, I guess I'm glad they did it. But they had a section of books it was not in the fiction section. I still love reading, but I loved reading as a kid. I'd always go to the library and I found this section of books and I was like, okay, it's not fiction. So these aren't make-believe stories. But then again, when I read them, it's going against the things I read in class, the science things, they're not mixing together. And so to me, that was the first indication that there were things that were strange happening in the world that were unexplainable and just weird. And like I said, I was drawn to weird stuff, like the weirdness of animals. And so that's what got me interested in paranormal. That's what got me started. And then as far as actual paranormal encounters, I think the first one, I was 10 years old when it happened. And I don't even know how to classify it. So I guess it was a phantom hand touched me, I guess. So I was at my house. I was 10 years old. And just long story short, I was going to close the door. That's all I was going to do. I was going to close the door, but I felt like an invisible hand like grab my wrist and really kind of like try to stop me from closing the door. And so I looked down and I was like, okay, there's nobody there. It felt just like a normal, regular hand. It wasn't painful. It just felt like a person was there trying to stop me from closing the door. And unfortunately, I ignored it and I just closed the door anyway. Well, it turned out what happened was that it was a freak accident. My mother's finger was like in the door, but like in a weird position, Wow. It was like back over here. No, over here instead of over here. Anyway, I didn't see it. Anyway, long story short, my mother had to go get stitches at the ER that night. It was very painful, right? So that was strange to me. Like I said, I don't know how to classify that. I don't think that's a negative experience. It sounds like whatever was happening. I don't know if it was me from the future, if it was like a dead relative watching me, if it was an alien. Look, I don't know what happened there, but I do remember it vividly. And yeah, it was just a phantom hand. And then in that same house, I guess, fast forward 9 years, I was like 19 years old and I was sleeping on the couch, taking a daytime nap. And at the time I had two younger sisters. They were like little kids. So I was just like, lying down, taking a nap in the daytime. And I look over and I saw my two sisters just standing over me, looking at me while I was lying in bed. And my first thought was like, that's weird. Who does that? Why are you just watching me sleep? But then I remember like my eyes focused a little bit, I was like, yeah, what's going on here? And it turned out to be like 3 gray aliens. They had little spacesuits on. and here's the thing. I'm so happy for this. They were very cute. They were not scary. They were not ugly. They were cute. I was like, oh, these guys are cute. They kind of look like Disney or Pixar designed them, looking back at it. And they noticed that I was awake and they got scared like children, and they were moving. I remember they moving very delicately, That's why I thought they were my sisters. They had the size of a children. They had the demeanor of children. They were acting like children. And then when they realized I was awake, they kind of got scared, and they just ran down the hallway of my house. And, you know, that was only a few feet away from where, literally just a few feet away from where the door phantom hand happened 9 years previously. So that happened. And that was strange because I was 19 and I was not thinking about aliens at the time. You know, when I was a kid, I was into it, and I went through a long period of not being into the paranormal. As an adult, I got into the paranormal when I was in graduate school. So I was getting my master's degree, and I had already published research. I had a lot of experience. Just, you know, people say they do research, you know, and that's great. A lot of people do research, but there's a certain type of academic research you do, which means, you know, you want to learn about a topic. So you start digging into the journals, you start digging into research papers that other people have done, and you cross-reference it. And it's kind of a little bit like archaeology, a little bit. You know, some of these papers are hundreds of years old. That's kind of academic research. So I was experiencing with that kind of stuff. And so then I got really sick in graduate school, like very sick. So I had to miss like a week of school. And I think I was watching Stephen Greer's Unacknowledged on Netflix. You know, people talk a lot about Stephen Greer. I have my own opinions about Stephen Greer, but that was a great documentary. And then so I saw that documentary, and that's the first time I started thinking about the paranormal and UFOs as an adult. And I was like, I started digging into it, and I was like, wow, there's the skeptics, they greatly underestimate the amount of evidence that is out there. And so that was in graduate school. I guess that was 2016. And that's what reignited my adult interest in the paranormal. I did have a UFO sighting maybe a year after that. So I was in the apartment complex, and at you know, in college, and I had a research assistant because I had gotten a big research grant to do a project. And so I had money for a research assistant. So I hired somebody, and we were just staying up really late. We were at another friend's house, and we made chili, I think. And we were just all hanging out, and it was like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 in the morning. We left the apartment, and we were in a parking lot, and then we both saw this like globe of light, basically. It was like in front of us, above some trees. And I saw it out the corner of my eye. My friend, I think she saw it head on. But yeah, to me, what I saw was like a globe of lights, maybe the size of a baseball or softball. And it was bright white, you know. It was almost like somebody punctured a hole in reality, you know. That's how bright it was. Mm-hmm. And I just went forward away from me, and it had a trailing tail, I remember, like a little tail, you know. And it didn't make any noise. There was nobody around. My friend, I think, who saw it more directly, she said it was beach ball size. And I'm gonna go with her size probably, because like I said, I was like not looking directly. I caught it peripheral vision. Yeah. I believe she was directly. And then afterwards, I had this great feeling. You know, I had that great creepy feeling. So I went out in the field, and I told my friends, and I was looking for like a meteor, and I couldn't find a meteor or anything like that. So I don't know what that was. I mean, hopefully, I don't know what it was. I mean, it was kind of small. Maybe it was just like, well, it was an orb of light for sure. But it doesn't mean it's paranormal. It could have been like ball lightning, although the conditions weren't really correct for it. But who knows? But I don't know what it was. And then my last paranormal experience, I think I'll have more just based on my track record. But this one also happened. This one happened afterwards. Shortly after the ball lightning thing, I was still working on that research project, the same one I had the money for. And I went to a research station in the woods. It was a one-horse town, and I stayed there all of December. It was this house that the Park Service had for scientists to stay. And I went there by myself in the middle of the woods, you know, one-horse town. There was one horse. I was going to say no horses. One-horse town. And in the daytime, you know, it was amazing. I would wake up kind of late. I would sleep in. I'd make a smoothie. I would go in the woods, take pictures. I spent like New Year's and Christmas there by myself. I mean, that's the kind of guy I am. I loved it. And so I had a great time in the daytime. It's one of the most biodiverse area. But in the nighttime, it was terrifying. It was so lonely in that house. It was like a big house for me by myself. I remember like it was so cold at night. And the Park Service had put like a cage with a key over the thermostat. So I had no control over it. So at night, I'd be like freezing, and I'd be lonely, and I'd be like so scared. I was very scared at night. And then, so anyway, one of those nights, I was on my cell phone. Somebody called me, and I picked it up. Once again, long story short, I'm pretty sure 2 non-humans called me two things called me that were not humans, because the voice they talked to me in, it had these weird qualities, you know. First of all, it did not, I couldn't pull a sex out of it, you know. I couldn't be like, that's a man. I could not pull a sex out of it. It sounded more animal-like. It sounded like what I would imagine a gremlin, a troll, an imp, a trickster, some kind of weird. That's what it sounded like some kind of weird animal. And they started talking to me, and I got really scared. And I still wonder if I was scared because I couldn't help it. Because a lot of people, they have a paranormal experience, and their fear jumps up like fast, right? And it's understandable why you would get so scared. But sometimes I wonder, is that a side effect of being around the paranormal? Does it mess with your nervous system somehow and just ramps you up to like 100? Right. Looking back, I wish I wasn't paranoid, because I would have been calmer. I would have enjoyed. I would have, imagine that. Imagine two aliens calling you. How cool is that? I wish I could have savored it. Really tried to have a conversation with them instead of freaking out. But yeah, they started laughing at me, because at first it was just one of them, and I was just fumbling over my words, trying to figure out. And then another one came on and started talking, and then they started talking to each other and laughing, and it was a weird experience. But yeah, that basically summarizes my paranormal experiences. Now, that area I was in is called the Big Thicket in Texas, and that's a paranormal hotspot. I believe that's probably, you hear about people talk about the Hudson Valley, the Uinta Basin. There's a lot of these paranormal hotspots. I think that's a paranormal hotspot because there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings there, a lot of them. I haven't seen a Bigfoot, but there are Bigfoot sightings there. There's a road called the Ghost Road, and it's known, the government or whoever puts up signs that says you're going to see orbs of light. So there's orbs of light. And I had a friend tell me this creepy story about her mother and grandmother. So in the area. So this is what happened. Okay, so let's try to get, it's a little confusing. 3 generations of women. So this is my friend telling me the story, but it didn't happen to her. It happened to her mother and grandmother. Okay. So my friend's mother was a bit younger when it happened, and she was with her mother. They were driving in the road, and the details are kind of sparse, but this is what I got. They saw a landed UFO on the side of the road, okay? And so the mother, the younger one, is like, I want to get out and I want to get closer. And then her mother, the grandmother, was like, that's a bad idea. Don't do it. And anyway, the mother did go out and get close to it, okay? So that did happen. But then both of these women refused to talk about what happened after that. And then my friend said that her grandmother was on her deathbed, and my friend was like, Grandma, please tell me what happened that day after my mother got out. And she still refused to tell her. So that sounds ominous and creepy. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Wow. No, that's a rich history with phenomena. And you touched on a couple things there where you talked about the academic research papers and how you were able to kind of dig into the history and dig into the past, which is, one of the reasons why people say take the scientific method so papers could be formulated and vetted by other people, right? So that's a perfect example of, on the opposite side, when someone is actually going to look through the paperwork that you've submitted. So I think that's awesome. And then another thing, being so prone to having experiences with the phenomena, that's another thing right there. And we can kind of dive into what you think that means, because I'll be talking about that during the segment later on in the show, because it does seem like some people, for whatever reason, have multiple encounters with the phenomena, where some people have none, where some people only have one. And it's just really strange. It kind of makes you think on if you're being singled out to have those experiences, right? So with that being said, we got about 4 minutes before we go to our first break. I did want to ask you, I've heard you say on your channel that you describe yourself as a scientist that studies the paranormal. So, could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, basically what I do is okay, so you've been around the paranormal community. I'm guessing most of our listeners are not new to the subject. Right. And so it's just, okay, here's the thing. Like, I try to look at things in a new light, because people are having the same conversations for like literally 80 years about UFOs. It's just regurgitating the same, they're tackling the subject the same way. Bigfoot, for example. Bigfoot is like, everybody's just like, let's just shoot one. That's what they got. They're like, let's go out, find one, and let's shoot it. And I'm like, that's just one example. So I've thought of alternate ways of proving Bigfoot is real. And so what I try to do is these when I understand why this is, because a lot of scientists are put off by the paranormal. So a lot of non-scientists look at the paranormal and they have a lot of similar ideas. So what I'm trying to do is, having my research background, try to take the paranormal seriously and go at it at different angles. Like, think of it in ways that people have never thought about it in order to make some kind of progress. So I try to apply a lot of scientific thinking, or what is called vertical thinking, thinking outside the box is another way of saying it, toward these age-old problems we still have. And it's fun to just do thought experiments, at the very least. A thought experiment, doesn't cost any money. You basically just think through everything in a different way. And that's what I try to do with the paranormal, is try to apply new ways of thinking.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll point to, recently Lou Elizondo made a statement just basically saying that paranormal really envelops everything. Like, some people only attribute it to ghosts and spirits, things of that nature, but paranormal, he was stating, is pretty much just anything that isn't solidified as normal. And so that the umbrella on that is so huge. So with that being said, there's a lot that goes into that. I wanted to kind of get into, and we only have a couple of minutes left, but maybe we can kind of start this, right? I also saw you talk about different plants, and how you did a video on how different plants and animals work in unison to kind of do things to benefit humanity, or just balance out the world. I don't know if you wouldn't mind kind of going into that a little bit, because I thought that was pretty awesome, that perspective you put on that.
Yeah, basically, like, the summary is that for nature to take care of us, we need to take care of nature. And so one of the ways that nature takes care of us that people may not realize is by giving us clean air and clean water. I'll talk about the air, okay? So if you go to an area with a lot of plants and trees outside, what happens is that there's dust and particles in the air, and that stuff will get stuck on the leaves. So the leaves will be like a filter, right? And then when it rains, it washes off the stuff, and it goes straight into the air, straight into the ground, into the water, where it gets cleaned further. In other words, it protects our lungs. That stuff never gets in our lungs. And so, but in order for that to happen, you don't just need the tree. You have to protect a lot of other animals. You might have to protect wolves. Why would you need to protect wolves? Well, what if you don't have wolves and you have too many deer? The deer will eat all the plants, and then you won't have filters. But if you have the wolves, then the wolves will control the deer, and you'll have the plants. So there's all these great things that nature provides us, but but it takes a lot of different animals working together. So we really can't single out one animal to protect. We got to protect all of it. It's like, the example's like a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, the service you get is food, but it's not just the cook. You have to have also the waiter. You have to have the cash register. You have to have the owner that pays the lights. So you wouldn't just keep the cook. So they all work together in a restaurant to give you the service. So in nature, all the animals, large and small, work together to give you the flood prevention, the clean air and clean water, recreation, food, pollination. There's literally so many things that nature does. It doesn't cost us anything except for us taking care of those animals and plants and microorganisms.
Seeing that, I'm glad that you went ahead and explained that, the delicate balance of nature and life in this planet we live on. And what we're going to do is, actually, on the other side of the break, is we're going to kind of get into, with that stage being set, how this applies to the potential for alien life, because you would assume it's all nature. So we're going to be doing that and more with Wild Trees, microbiologist, right here on Spaced Out Radio. You guys don't go anywhere. Go get your popcorn, if anything, and come right back, because we'll be back in just a minute. Clear. So we have about 5 minutes. In case you needed to do anything real quick, you definitely have time to do that. Other than that, yeah, awesome cowboy hat. So you're in Texas.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I moved here in February. I mean, I've been in Texas this whole time, but I moved to the country. This is actually a little cabin I've been living in since February.
Wow, off the grid?
No, luckily I'm on the grid. I couldn't go that far, so I got electricity, I got water. There's a state park about 5 minutes from here, and I've been volunteering there. I started a new program called the Bug Safari. Basically, it's what it sounds like. See, every state park in Texas, at least probably in the country, they have to have interpretation programs. They have to offer some kind of involvement where visitors get to interact or learn about nature. So I came up with this bug safari idea. So basically, I have it right here. So I actually go out. Oh. So there's some trails I go out to, and I tell the kids or the adults, I'm like, look, I'm an expert on bugs. So if you see any bugs on the trail, let me know. We'll try to catch them. I'll tell you about them. If you have any questions, let me know. And it goes really well. And we talk about, that video you were mentioning, that was actually from a bug safari. My sister recorded it. So that was actually the first one. That was kind of reminds me, I like Jurassic Park. It reminds me of Jurassic Park because that was the first the first tour I did as a bug safari. And then the park superintendent was there. 2 park rangers were there. A family was there with their kid. And so it was the first time I was testing it out, and it went well. Everything got approved, and I've been doing it now. But yeah, that was where that recording came from.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. Being able to give that type of knowledge and information, and really connecting to nature, because this is what this whole thing that we're doing is tied to nature, and that's why it's going to be awesome to kind of get into this with you, because how your outlook on nature applies to the phenomena is really like the question, and that's what we'll get into after the break. The study of the insects, that's the entomology, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And it's interesting. A lot of people say that. Some people, not a lot of people, some people have said that grays are insect. There's praying mantis type beings people talk about. Not only the way they look, but it could be that their system of life is insect-like. I'm talking about insects like ants that have a colony, bees that have they have these hierarchical levels. And you see that in fiction. I don't know if you've seen the new Alien Romulus movie. I've seen it twice, but aliens are aliens are the alien, the xenomorph alien, is based on a real life organism called a parasitoid, and which is an insect. A lot of people don't realize that, but the reason why the alien is so scary is because it's realistic, and all this stuff that the alien does in those movies, there's real insects that do it to other animals. So these are real things. I mean, insects do lay their young inside of living things, and they do burst out, and do have a queen. It's just, and that movie's really cool because it lets us feel like what's already happening. We're not used to being the prey. We're used to being the predator. But with the real life aliens, I think, talking about what we're going to talk about, that's probably what's happening. These aliens or whatever they are, they're probably natural. They're part of nature. It's just that we're on the short end of the stick. We're the ones that are getting manipulated and impregnated and eaten and all this stuff that we do. Another thing you can mention is what I think about is kind of, I don't know if it's hypocrisy, but it makes us self-examine how we treat animals, for example. Because we're like, hey, if we're being abducted by grays, we don't like that. That's got to stop. Yet we abduct animals all the time. So why is it okay? So we're saying it's okay for us to abduct these animals because we're higher, we're more intelligent. So that makes it all good. But then again, these aliens are probably smarter than us. So shouldn't that be okay too? I mean, it just makes us our own actions, I think.
And yeah, so right now, because we're on YouTube people can hear this part of the conversation, but radio won't be able to. So we'll kind of go back into that, because I think that's awesome how you pointed that out. So I will start off with the entomology, and because I have a question about that actually, and we come back in about 30 seconds here.
Okay, sweet.
Everybody out there. Oh, let's see. Applesauce, you came in late. I saw you. There you go. Thanks for coming in, Cosmic Joe. I see you there too. Resonant, I see you there too. Jerry Carter. Let's see. Let's go back. Ron J, I see you. Francis Allen.
How many people are in the room? Can't see you right now. How many people are watching live, do you think?
126 at the moment. And we're coming back. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. We're getting back into this conversation with Wild Trees Microbiologist. It's getting interesting. We're talking about nature, how nature applies to maybe the phenomenon, what we're looking at. It probably is all one. But for all you space travelers out there, before I forget, go ahead and consider taking the next step and joining the Space Travelers Club for as little as $5 a month by joining our Patreon. We'd appreciate it as we come back with Wild Trees. So, Wild Trees, we were talking during the break about entomology, which is the study of insects, and you're into that. I wanted to know, and we'll kind of go deep with this, but are there any, if you look at the insect world, are there any outliers that, because you assume everything has its role in nature and in the insect world as well. Are there any outliers that just like you scratch your head and say, I don't understand what this insect's purpose is? Because my theory is maybe some of the insects that we see could be from somewhere else is potentially as well.
Interesting. That's a good point. Okay. Yeah, there's two ways I could take this. Okay, the first way is an organism that some people have suggested might not be from here. And that would be, well, so it's an organism. It's not, it is an invertebrate, but it's not an insect. So entomologists study insects, which is a type of animal. I'll just tell you right now, one of the easiest way to tell if are you dealing with an insect is, does it have 6 legs, basically? So if you see a snail with has no legs, not an insect. If you see a spider, it's got 10 legs, not an insect. But if you see a grasshopper or a mosquito, it's got 6 legs, it's an insect. Just to differentiate that. So now I'm going to talk about a different type of organism. It's got 8 legs, so it's not an insect. It's called the water bear or a tardigrade. Okay. Now these are microscopic. They're found all over the world. Now they're very unique because they're their own type of animal. You know, they're their own category of animal. So that already makes them very strange. They're very, very ancient. We have fossils of them hundreds of millions of years old. They're very resilient. So, you know, a lot of times people say water bears are the strongest animals in the world. That's true, but they're also the weakest animals in the world. They're both. They're the strongest and the weakest. What happens is that these are tiny little animals, and they live in water. They have to be surrounded by water in the forest, you know, when it rains. But when they're awake and they're moving around, they're kind of like gummy bears. You know, they're so soft. You could easily kill one. Don't kill them, but you could. But what happens is when it dries out, you know, they're water animals. When the environment dries out, which happens naturally when the rain evaporates, they make this cocoon around themselves made of a glass. The cocoon is called the tun, T-U-N. Inside the tun, they go under suspended animation almost. We don't know how long it can last. It could be, you know, hundreds of years, dozens of years. They basically stop their metabolism, everything. When they're in that glass cocoon, they can survive extreme temperatures, the vacuum of space, extreme pressure, extreme heat. And so some people have suggested that perhaps these came from another system, another planet. They hitched a ride on a meteor. Well, the idea is that, like, let's say a meteor or something hits a planet, right? It hits the planet hard, and it throws chunks of the planet off into space. Well, if those chunks of planets had a tardigrade in a ton, it would survive. And if eventually those fragments of planet hit Earth, then they would wake up. So they would have to come from an Earth-like planet. But yeah, that's one organism that people have hypothesized that could possibly be from another system, another planet, another place. They're not harmful. That's good. They're not harmful. But to answer your other question about an animal that, what does it do? I mean, I don't think it's an alien. Maybe I haven't thought about it, but mosquitoes are an insect. They have 6 legs. They are the deadliest animal for humans, bar none. Forget about your crocodiles. Forget about your lions, forget about your snakes. Mosquitoes are the most deadly animal to humans because they carry these diseases, and there's researchers that are thinking about this sounds like it could be a bad idea. Sounds like a Michael Crichton novel, the author of Jurassic Park, but some scientists and entomologists are thinking of genetically modifying a mosquito so that it's infertile or it has infertile genes, releasing it into the wild so it can pass on the genes, and eventually we would make the mosquito extinct. So if it goes the way they planned, if it goes according to plan, which we know, we know that scientific experiments always go perfectly exactly how we planned them. There's never anything that goes wrong. I'm joking. But yeah, so the mosquitoes, I don't know what purpose they serve. The larvae are aquatic, they're in the water. They get eaten by other animals, like dragonflies eat the larvae, but dragonflies can eat other things as well. So just to answer your question, the tardigrades are ones that perhaps could have an origin from somewhere else. And mosquitoes are an insect that I don't know if we'd really have a big loss if they were to leave, so much so that scientists are thinking about purposely making them extinct.
Yeah, that's very interesting to know because, sometimes I feel like humans are out of place. Like we don't actually serve a purpose in helping the planet in any way because all we do is destroy the planet. So it's like everything we do goes against nature. And so it seems like we're out of place. So just looking in the bug world, it's cool to see something that fits that bill too. And I know you're not into aquatic stuff or not a specialist in that. But I was wondering if you had an opinion on something in the ocean that potentially matches that same thing, just something that doesn't make sense, therefore may be from somewhere else.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's see. I have to think about it because I know people talk about the squid, the cephalopods, being weird, being smart, but I'd have to look at the fossil record. A lot of these questions have to do with fossil record. If I could see evidence of fossils, then yeah. Well, there are extinct species of cephalopods. Like there were I don't know if they're still alive. Well, there's the nautilus. A nautilus has got a shell, and then it's got like a squid coming out of it.
Yeah,
I believe they're alive, but there used to be some that became extinct. So they do have a long record of life. So off the top of my head, I can't think of anything in the ocean that fits that category. That is a good question, though.
Now, and that, because obviously any outliers would be something just to look at because we know these things are here, whatever they are from wherever they come from. So it's like, okay, did they bring things along? And kind of what made me even think about that to begin with is you wonder if, they talk about humans at some point here in the near future with nanotechnology having the ability to create like robotic insects, something small enough to kind of not be noticed, but still be able to kind of spy in on individuals. So when I look at something flying around, I'm like, is that what it is? Or is that, because you would assume that these aliens or whatever they are so far advanced that they've hit that technology already. And why wouldn't they have something that small, nanotechnology, to come in and fly around and spy? So that's kind of what took me down that road.
No, I like that. I've thought about that too, actually. And I haven't heard, other than me and you, I haven't heard anybody else talk about this. So I'll just repeat what you said, basically. But the idea is that, nanotechnology, it's on the cusp of breaking through right now. We're it hasn't hit the mainstream, but we know it will sometime if we don't kill ourselves. Nanotechnology will change medicine. It'll change a lot of industries. But the idea I thought about is like, if these aliens have advanced technology, why wouldn't they take advantage of nanotechnology? And we don't hear anybody talking about nanotechnology. The closest thing, and it's not nanotechnology, are these implants that people see they have in them. I see the closest thing because they're not really nano. Nano means like it's a scale that's like, I don't know. It's very, very tiny. Like for example, I used to in graduate school I used a electron scanning microscope. Okay, so this is a microscope that would basically you'd have to dehydrate your object you want to look at. So let's say you want to look at pollen, like a little grain of pollen, which is microscopic, right? So you would dehydrate it, then you would cover it in gold dust. So this microscope requires a bar of gold. So you would feed it a bar of gold, and then it would cover everything in gold dust. Then you put it in a vacuum chamber, and it would throw electrons, gold electrons at it, which are a subatomic particle. And then those would bounce back, and it would form an image, a 3D image. So what I'm trying to say is, at a nanoscale, this little microscopic grain of pollen, which is a part of plants, it's a reproductive gamete, it would get so, you'd be able to get so big, it looked like an island. Like that's how big you could make the pollen grain. It looked like you could just walk around in it, fall into a lake. So that's nanoscale. It's making things that small or being able to manipulate the world at that scale. Because to me, like, I'm a microbiologist. I love the micro world. I think I've spent probably hundreds of hours exploring the micro world. To me, exploring the micro world is the equivalent of time traveling in space, or deep sea diving, because it's a completely hidden world. All the rules are different. There's all kinds of different organisms that live there. So, I mean, I do it with a microscope, but to me, like, looking in a microscope is crazy. It's like I said, it's like exploring another world. And I've spent hundreds of hours probably exploring that world of the micro world. I recommend people do it too. Kids love it. If I go to a school and I show them a microscope, it's like I show them a magic trick. You know, they'll look into they'll look at the eyepiece and they'll look down at that slide, and then they'll look up, and it's just like they're trying to understand.
Yeah. And it's only been what, 30 years since we noticed things that small? How long has it been since we realized that there were things that small? I
feel like the microscope was invented around the 1700s. I feel like. So about 300 years.
As far as like seeing microbes and things of that nature, like being aware of the existence of those 1700s?
I believe it's the 1700s. Probably some pond scum was the first thing people looked at. A little bit of pond water. Lou Elizondo said something that the first thing people said when they looked at a microscope were little beasties. And they're talking about
yeah, you did, yeah,
protozoans, nematodes, all kinds of stuff. But you know, that microscope, you know, I think we need a microscope equivalent for the paranormal. That's what we're missing. We're missing a tool that easily lets us see the paranormal. And some people are already doing it. They're using high-end infrared cameras, or they're using expensive cameras with different filters or capabilities, not your normal camera. And they're seeing UFOs, you know? So right now that technology is expensive, and there's literally no real reason to buy that technology other than looking for UFOs. So that's why a lot of people don't have it. But I feel like we're missing the microscope for the paranormal.
So let me ask you this. You know, they had a few years back, they had the rendezvous, the capsule that went and hit the asteroid, landed, collected a sample, brought it back to Earth. And then they took some time before they opened it, because they were, you know, I'm sure we're being considerate of like microbial things that might have been in there from outer space, alien microbes. When we think about that, and then we think about how these extraterrestrials are visiting here, and if they're biological themselves, then they too may carry some sort of alien microbe. Do you feel like, as a microbiologist, that there's a sense of threat there just based on introducing microbes that aren't from Earth to the human race?
Yeah. That, I mean, we have examples of that happening already. Non-paranormal, which is basically this topic called invasive species. So, you know, we have these the pythons in Florida, for instance. You know, just giving you an example of a non-paranormal, what could happen. So, when you introduce an animal that's not from where it's supposed to be, it wreaks havoc on the system. So you have the pythons that have run amok in Florida, Everglades. You have fire ants. You know, fire ants came from South America, incredibly painful, all over North America now. I think the way they came over, kind of like your scenario, but not with aliens, is people had ships in South America, and they were coming to North America. And I'm not a ship expert, but I believe what they had to do is they had to weigh down the ship And so they get dirt. So they just got a bunch of dirt from South America with the ants, and they just shoved it into the boat to kind of weigh it down for the buoyancy. They weren't thinking. Then they came to North America, and they just dumped all that dirt here, and now you introduce fire ants. So that is possibly that's how it would work out. Now you're making me think about, has that happened already? You know, so we know the consequences of invasive species. Now you're making me think of, has it happened already with an alien, not just with our
plagues and things of that nature. When you kind of, I mean, obviously that gets into conspiracy theories, because people will say, okay, like COVID, for instance, or the Black Plague or some other thing that historically kind of outbroke within humanity and took us all out. Now, with that being said, so the reason why I'm asking you that, and it seems like there potentially could be a threat, especially if they're like carbon-based entities with DNA, then you would think, okay, then what about extraterrestrial abductions, right? Because when our doctors, when they examine us, they cover up, they put on gloves, they sterilize, they do all these things to not transmit. So it would make me think, if alien microbes were a threat, then extraterrestrials wouldn't be hands-on during abductions. And then if that's true, or then okay, it starts to make me think, well, then are these abductions, does it more show that likely these abductions are abductions of the consciousness and not actually physical? Because if they're touching you with their hands, you would assume you might catch something at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a couple of ways we could take this. Yeah, let me mention a few of them. Okay, well, first, let's talk about the idea that that these aliens are actually Earth inhabitants. So they're not from another world, they're not from another planet, they're not from another dimension. They're just from Earth. They've been here forever. In that case, then that would explain why they could just walk around on Earth, breathe our air, walk around in our gravity. So that would kind of limit, it would still be dangerous, but it would limit some of that cross-contamination if they are from Earth, okay? Another idea would be, what if when they do abduct us, what if those are robots that are doing it and they've been sterilized? You know? So they're just a medical tool, basically. Okay, another idea would be that, you know, sometimes people do people do die when they interact with them. I'm thinking about the Varginha incident in, I believe it was Brazil. One of the most fascinating cases I've read. But these ugly aliens crashed, and apparently a policeman caught one with like a net. You know, ugly little demon-like aliens. I'm sure they were sweet guys, but they were very terrifying looking. And then apparently that guy got very sick from interacting with them. Now that's a special case because they weren't abducting him. It wasn't a planned abduction. It was actually the other way around. It was a person abducting the alien. So he did get apparently and died from contact with them. So that's kind of scary. Yeah.
So when you look at these different species, right? Because I thought about that, maybe because I guess is normally the grays that are doing the abducting, but I've heard other species do that as well. And then with the grays, I have heard that yes, the smaller ones are supposed to be androids or robotic entities, which would make sense as them being a tool, sterilized, which would make total sense. But you know, just like you pointed out, though, like the Virginia one, that one, based on just the illustration, I don't think that one would be a gray. And they said it was oily and all that stuff. So with that being said, you know, you would think that in that case, if that was true, what happened, that there would be more examples of that as far as like an outbreak or something, you know, other occurrences where this would happen, just based off statistics. You would think there would have been other times that this has happened. So as a microbiologist, as far as not trying to cross-contaminate, if you were the alien species, how would you approach this alien species, human beings? Like, how would you approach handling them or interacting?
Well, that's a good point. Let's see. I would probably... well, first I would try to contract it out with a research assistant. If I had an android, I would do that. But I guess one of the first things I would do, I would have to wear protective gear. You know, I would have to wear a complete like hazmat suit when I'm interacting with them. That would protect me, basically. Yeah. And it's funny because as a biologist, I'm really used to using gear to adapt to my environment. And it reminds me of the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, a lot of people were like, not okay with the mask. But to me, maybe because I have experience with a lot more cumbersome gear, I'm okay with adapting to the environment changing. For instance, when I did high altitude research in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, it's not that high, but it's 11,000 feet. I would get very winded, and I'd have to have a camelback. You'd have to constantly drink water. You constantly peeing just because of the altitude. And I had supplemental oxygen. So I had a can of oxygen. I was constantly feeding myself. So to me, that's a lot more cumbersome. Constantly feeding yourself oxygen, drinking water and peeing just to exist in that hazardous environment. That's, to me, it's a lot more work than just putting on a little mask every time I go to the 7-Eleven. But I guess if you're not used to it. But to answer your question, yeah, I would wear gear. That's what I would do. I would wear protective gear, a full hazmat suit to prevent that contamination. And it would help us both. It would help both ways. It would help them and it would help me. Or like I said, I would have someone else do it. Like I said, if I had an android that could do it, I would have him do it. And that's what a lot of people say. A lot of people say that the aliens that interact with us, they're just basically servants. They're not the actual big brains. It's like, it's basically like the CEO of McDonald's. The CEO of McDonald's, he's the guy in boss, or she, I don't know who it is, but that person's not flipping burgers. They contract that stuff out. So yeah.
Here's another thing about that, right? Because when the whole recovery of the debris from the asteroid was going on, and I was just saying in the moment, I'm like, okay, first of all, we don't know what's in there. I mean, now they do because they opened it, but there was a point where we didn't know what was in there, and they decided to open it here on Earth. Whereas if something was in there, essentially what could have put us in a position where we had something we probably couldn't recover from. And then when you look a little further, when we talk about like the government's retrieving biological entities and storing them somewhere here on Earth, you would figure if there's some sort of microbial chance that some of that could get out into the public, that just isn't a great idea. It isn't a great idea to maybe store some of those things here on Earth. Like, it would probably make more sense if they were keeping it up at the space station or somewhere off planet until they figure out what it is that they're dealing with, right? I mean, you as a microbiologist, like, would that to put safeguards in the way for the rest of humanity and not just the people involved in the experiment, like, would you take a step like that? Does that make sense to do something like that?
Yeah, that's what I would do ideally. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, what I think actually has happened based on a lot of experience, a lot of stories, even Bob Lazar mentioned someone died experimenting with the craft. What I think actually happened with these crash retrievals, I think a lot of people died. A lot of people involved with crash retrievals died in the beginning. Maybe now they learned their lesson, but I believe in the beginning was the Wild West, and people died from explosions, from reprisal attacks, and from contamination. Because it could even be an electrical discharge. It could be a chemical that's secreted from, because a chemical, like I said, like venom, for instance, venom from a king cobra is deadly, but it's not a pathogen. Venom is not alive. It's not bacteria. It's still a substance produced by an animal that's deadly to you. So I really think, based on the stories, a lot of people unfortunately lost their lives. The grunts of the crash retrieval lost their lives, and perhaps now they have lost their lesson. Robert Bigelow talked about how he was going to get access to some.
You got about 2 seconds. Let me hold you there because this is interesting. Let's cover this on the back end of on the next hour. Guys, it's getting wild. Wild Trees just gave us some really crazy theory right here. Maybe a lot of people have died from this already, and we don't know. It would make sense. The government has covered up more, and they've exposed soldiers to more than deadly things as well. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with this awesome conversation with Wild Trees.
To After Hours with Mr. Rob G on the only place where you can own the night. Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio. You've tuned your dial to the right frequency.
All right, we're clear and we're going on video break. See you in 5 minutes.
All right, sir.
right, everyone. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show with me, your host, Mr. Rob G, and our guest, Wild Trees. We're going to be getting right back into it. We have about 30 seconds left before we come back from our radio break. Guys, hour 2, start getting your questions ready. I'm going to be looking out for them, but when we're deep in conversation, I might miss a few, so don't be upset. I might ask you to repost them. I'll catch them as I see them, though. We got about 10 seconds. Welcome back, everyone, to After Hours, the After Hours radio show, hour number 2. As we go ahead and get ready to jump back into conversation with microbiologist Wild Trees. It's been an awesome one so far. Remember, anything you miss, you can jump into our archives at any time, youtube.com/@spacedoutradio. Make sure you go ahead and jump in. Have fun. There's a lot of stuff there. Also, don't forget to follow us, Instagram and X at spacedoutradio, at spacedoutradioshow. As we get back into the conversation with Wild Trees, man. Okay, so you blew my mind at the end of the first hour when you kind of put forth the theory that, maybe a lot of people have already, met their doom or met their end, coming in contact with these things, with the initial exposure to these extraterrestrials. And it makes sense because we saw on film our soldiers being exposed to radiation with nuclear tests, above ground explosion, and then they send the troops in to go clean up the mess. No protection at all. And there's just various other instances where our government has exposed, the citizens to things, and it just makes sense when you say that. So kind of going deeper into that, if you want to go ahead and continue where you left off. I know you were mid-sentence when we stopped there.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so first I'll say, I've thought about this a lot. Like, I would love to work for the government as far as this problem is concerned, the paranormal UFO problem. I would love to work for the government, I'm not saying I agree with everything, although I will say I love my government. I love the United States of America. I love every branch of the government. Unless you're a branch that hates another branch, I also hate that branch. Anyway, I love my country. But if I'm working with the government, you got to have your head on a swivel, man. Nobody's going to take care of you, constantly. Like, you don't want to get poisoned. You don't want to get blown up. You got to do that yourself. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I feel like that's happened. We know for sure it's happened. You mentioned some examples. There's some examples of it purposely happening, like Tuskegee experiments. Yes. Unfortunately, that was a purposeful thing the government did, a shameful thing they did. But yeah. So I was talking about how Robert Bigelow, he was, he's a billionaire. He made his money, I think, with hotels or motels, and he studied the paranormal a lot. He was one of the owners of Skinwalker Ranch. And he's really interested in the afterlife. He had a son, I believe, who died, and that made him interested. He's had his own really crazy paranormal experiments and experiences. But he was getting a contract with the government to store some UFO crash material. And I think it fell through. But when he was talking about the process, he said he had to go through this long outfitting process for his warehouse. He had to make sure it was suitable to hold that material. I always assumed it was maybe for safety reasons. Like safety, what I mean is like nobody breaking in. But now that we talk about it, maybe it was safety for other things, like protecting it from exposure to the environment and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of further going into this. So if, just say, okay, these alien microbes were present here on Earth, but they were harmless to human beings. And say the government came to Wild Trees and said, "Hey, we want you to head this program where you search for any signs of alien microbes." Like, what would be the plan, the master plan for you to go ahead and uncover or search these things out? Because, assuming if they're benign, then, you're not going to have people that are sick, but these things could be present right in front of us, right? What would be the steps you would take to kind of find those things?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do, the easiest thing I would do was, let's say I'm presented with a body, a living body, a dead body, and a craft, you know? So the first thing I would do, honestly, is I would get some sterile Q-tips, you know, sterile Q-tips, a little cotton end, and I would just start rubbing everything. And I would rub the little gray alien's head. I would rub this, and then what you do once you rub it, you get these plates. They're called agar plates. You've seen them in movies, maybe. And then you rub your Q-tip on there, and then you put it in an incubator, and you wait a few days, and then you see what grows there, you know. And you could identify it by the DNA, or you could identify it by the way it looks, or the growth patterns. Because I'm pretty sure, here's the thing, if I swabbed all those things, something would grow. Number one, just because it's already been exposed to if I'm looking at it, I'm on Earth, it's already been exposed to the Earth environment. So some Earth bacteria or fungus or spores or something will grow on it. And that's interesting information, even if it's not alien, because it tells us that these certain Earth organisms are compatible with growing on the surface of these other things. And if I don't get anything, if nothing grows, that also tells me something. You know what that reminds me of? You know, it's possible to make a surface where nothing grows on it. And maybe that's, now that I think about it, maybe that's what's going on with these aliens. You know, because so you think, a lot of people think about, like, okay, we need to sterilize something. You know, I talked about, you know, being sterile. So people always think about chemicals. They're like, okay, we got to spray a chemical on you, or you have to, you know, expose it to heat. And that's true. You know, you can kill pathogens with heat and chemicals, but there's another way that you could do it. Prevent, and it's by the structure of the surface. So here's the example. Okay, so there was a scientist who wanted to stop algae from growing on the sides of ships and submarines. You know, that's a big problem. And he noticed that sharks are big, and sharks always look so clean. They never have anything growing on them. So he started thinking, long story short, he found out that on a microscopic level, the skin of a shark is so jagged that nothing can cling and grow on it. So they made an application where now they make handles of, you know, scalpels, medical equipment handles, covered in fake shark skin, and that prevents your bacteria from growing. So I just thought about that. It could be that a lot of these surfaces, or the skin of an alien, or the suit, it could be that on a microscopic level, talking about the nanotechnology, if it's so rough, nothing can grow on it, you know. And that's cool, you know. Like I said, you don't need a chemical, you don't need a heat to prevent all these bacteria from spreading or growing. All you need is the shape. If the shape is jagged enough, it can prevent things from growing on it. And that could be deployed by them. That would be a good solution, actually. But yeah, I would start swabbing everything. That's what I would do first.
Now, here's one of the things. So, okay, so you mentioned in that scenario, okay, there's an alien body. So I'm looking more like an archaeologist, right? There is no proof that something was there, but the likelihood something was there is high based on the fact that we know these things have landed, gotten out the craft, walked around. So, for instance, like if you went to Roswell, or you went to aerial school, or even Virginia, where you had the alien walking around, wouldn't there be value in having the microbiologist go to those scenes to maybe sort out or try to find something that is foreign? And maybe they do that. Maybe they do it.
That's a good point. Okay, let's talk about Virginia, for example. So if you see the movie by James Fox called Moment of Contact, it's about the Virginia experience. And he shows the courtyard where it happened. So there's a little courtyard where the alien was walking around. And I don't think he gives the address, but what I'm planning on doing is looking through Google Maps and trying to find the exact spot and looking at it. But okay, let's say, so that's pretty easy. I think we could probably find the exact courtyard where it happened. And now that you mention it, yeah, there would be some value in looking at that courtyard, because it's not that big, you know, it's just a little walled off area. Oh, so if people that don't know the story, you know, in South America, I think it was Brazil. I'm not 100%, but there's a city called Varginha. There was a UFO that crashed, and then there was at least 2 escaped aliens. They kind of looked like grays, but they were more like devilish looking. They had like little horns.
Mm-hmm.
Were kind of sickly and oily looking. They have a weird smell. Now I wonder if that weird smell and that weird oily look, maybe that's not what they normally look like. Maybe that's an animal that's suffering, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe if it was healthy in its craft, it looked totally different. Its skin was different. It smelled like flowers. I don't know. I really do think perhaps it was suffering. That's why it was giving off all these weird toxic things. But anyway, so then one of them got escaped, and these little girls at the time were walking home, and they saw one of them like hunched over in a courtyard, a little walled off area with a little plot of land. And then they got scared and they ran away, and they drew pictures of it. Anyway, so that's the background. But yeah, I think there would be some benefit. I would love to go to that courtyard. And like I said, it's not the most impossible thing in the world to do. But yeah, if I went to that courtyard, yeah, I guess the first thing would be the ground. I would look around the ground. Yeah. To see if there's any. First of all, I would like just visually see if there's any differences in the area. Like, is there a patch, you know, against the wall where nothing's growing, you know, or maybe things are growing abnormally large, you know, maybe more things are growing.
Yeah.
So visually, I would see if anything's changed. But yeah, even now, I would want to get some soil samples. And so with the soil samples, I could also analyze them in a number of different ways. But that's very interesting. You got a scientist's brain there, Rob. You're really thinking.
Man.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, man, because you'd be, man, that'd be the perfect job. Sign you up for that. And, you know, because you would assume the stuff is residual and it's going to be there. So, you know, somebody, like I said, maybe they have someone that does it. I've never heard of it though. So maybe it's something, you know, like you said, I'd go with you if you find out where the courtyard is. Man, I'll go with you, dude. Let's go. Trying to get to Brazil anyway. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So with that being said, you know, we're talking about things on a micro level, and I know we talked about this on the last interview. We talked about how when you look at this microscopic world, how it kind of, and I'm sure I'm going to say it wrong here, but it kind of mimics our place in the universe, essentially. And I'm sure you could explain that a lot better.
Yeah, basically, to me, it seems like a lot of things are repeating themselves on different scales. So one example is like, okay, if you look at our planets in our solar system, you know, you have a sun in the center, which is circular, and rotating around it, you have circular planets, right? We're not going to get into the flat Earth right now. I don't think it's a flat Earth, but this is a joke anyway. But you have the sun, and around it, you have these planets, including Earth, and they rotate around it. And to us, we think, well, wow, that's a big scale. I mean, we're talking about planets and solar systems. But if you go small scale and you look at one atom, you know, one atom of oxygen, let's say, or let's say this atom right here in my nose, this atom, if you look at it, it also mimics the shape of a solar system, because in the middle you have the neutron and the protons, and then around it, you know, orbiting it, you have electrons. So you seem to have all these mimicking things. And so I think that if you keep going smaller, you're going to see the same things over and over again. And if you keep going bigger, you're going to see the same things over and over again. And I think it's infinite. I don't think it ever stops. I think so. What that means is that humans, our scale is the most important scale that ever existed, but it's also the smallest scale that ever existed. Because so we're at the human scale, right? So we're operating. We're like anywhere from like, you know, 4 feet tall to like 6 feet tall, right? That's a human scale. Well, you could keep going smaller and smaller, and that would mean that we're the biggest thing ever. So we're the most important thing. But then you could also keep going bigger and bigger, and that would mean we're the smallest thing. So I think there's that duality. No matter what you are, whatever scale you're at, you're always the biggest thing ever, and you're always the smallest thing ever. And it just keeps going on like that forever.
So let me ask you this. So I wanted to kind of talk about the Nazca mummies, right? Because here's the thing, right? When they first came out, everybody was like, "Oh, they're fake," you know. Then and here's the thing. This is what I'll say. I told everybody in the beginning. I'm just like, okay, yeah, it looks fake. I would probably lean to say it's a hoax, but you got to vet the information first. Like, why not test it, run tests on it, and just verify that it is or isn't what they're saying that it is. As a microbiologist, seeing that it's still in the news, is still being talked about, there's people that want to examine it and do, what would be some of the things you would focus on to try to kind of put it to bed or solidify that this is something real here?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. And I will say I had the same attitude as you did. You know, when the mummies came out, I wasn't 100% for them, and I wasn't 100% against them. I said exactly what you said. I was like, let's just give it some work. Let's work on it a little bit, you know, before we make any hasty generalizations. And it's funny because I made one video on the Nazca mummies, and all the comments are like, please do a follow-up video. People are dying to know more about these Nazca mummies. They want to know what's going on with them. And I've been kind of keeping up with it a little bit. If anybody wants to send me the links or all the updated information that they think is interesting, do that little research. I will make a video on it because that'll save me the time of going through and digging. And I also speak Spanish. So if you have access to Mexican links or Hispanic Spanish links, you send me that stuff too. So anyway, so yeah, I do want to do a follow-up on him. What would I do? Let's see. Well, what has already been done? People have already done like 3D CT scans of them, you know? So they've already scanned them. Apparently there's some DNA work being done on them already. That's a good question. Let me see. Well, they're just so odd because, number one, there's so many different types of organisms, you know? It's not just one, you know? Some of them are human size and some of them are tiny, you know? And the little ones, you know, and you can't say that the little ones are younger versions of the big ones because the little ones have eggs in them. Yeah. So it kind of indicates that the little ones are already sexually mature. So it indicates that the little ones, if they're real, they're adults already. So it's basically, you have all these different organisms, and then some of them have like metal in them, metal plates in them, and some of them do have animal parts in them, but that could be just because, you know, the mummification process is weird. You know, the rituals you do, you know, sometimes you replace organs and stuff like that. Doesn't mean it's a fake. Because I think people have said that they are genuinely old. So that's not really into question. They're not like a new thing someone made. They are old. But the question, I don't know, man. Like, I still don't know what the hell's going on with them. I'm like, are these real organisms that actually lived and breathed? Are they hoaxes that were made a long time ago? Are they genetic creations that were genetically modified by someone else and made this way? I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of where everyone is at, right? So they did the DNA, and that's kind of, I guess, where everything is at right now. I mean, you know, the theories are that it's from grave robbers. They just robbed graves and pieced together some stuff, which could be a thing. I mean, here, this is the thing I would say in both cases is we probably don't know what a fake alien that was put together from you know, human body parts looks like, and we also don't know what a mummified alien looks like. So with that being said, I just, going off a look alone, I don't think that that's enough to kind of dismiss it, right? So you know, I'm all about just, hey, just let the people finish doing what they're doing, and then maybe it's nothing, and just like we originally thought, they just throw it out and we just move on. But I think, you know, there's just too many examples of, you know, data that I think was actually good data, not just with about this, but other things that people threw out immediately, just dismissed, and didn't really let it go through that vetting process. And I think we have that bad in this community. And you know, this community of people that want the answers and disclosure and the truth, but then we also dismiss things without giving it a fair shake. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. There is a problem with what we take seriously, what we don't take seriously. See, the problem is that Like, we really do need some kind of disclosure, because we don't have a framework, basically, like we need to have a framework to build off of. So right now, it's like all these multiple parties in the paranormal world, they're trying to build their own framework. And we really just need one system. Like, here's an example. Okay, so I'm an entomologist. I love discovering new species, but there was this guy named Carl Linnaeus, and in the 1700s, he noticed that we needed a system for organizing animals, a worldwide system, because at the time, every different culture, every different language had a different name for the same animal. And so he realized we can't make any progress. We don't have any framework because everybody's got their own system. So what he did is he developed Linnaean taxonomy, or binomial nomenclature. Basically, what he said is like, look, guys, from now on, every living organism, every single one, is only going to have one name, okay? And that name's going to have two parts, like a first and last name, and it's going to be in Latin. It's going to be in one language that all of us can understand because it's a dead language. Basically, he made a framework. From that framework, now we have a really robust zoological system. We have a very robust system of botany, and we really made a lot of progress in understanding biodiversity in animals. And that's only because we had that framework. So there is no framework right now with the paranormal, probably because nobody takes it seriously, probably because we don't have disclosure. So I know a lot of people want disclosure. Some people are like, forget disclosure is never going to happen. But one of the definite benefits of disclosure would be the framework we could build. And then from that, we could make progress. And I think that's stopping us, is we don't have that framework. Another thing, going back to the Nazca mummies, is I was going to say, just one way I would look at it, now that we have the mummies, I'm like, great, that's great. What I would do is I would be like, let's look at these cave systems. Like, let's try to find a live one now, or let's try to find its old habitat, We know the cave system. We know the general area. I would start exploring that to find evidence of a habitat, of something, That's what I would do. And I would start digging deep into the legends from that area, like look into the archaeology, anthropology, cultural folklore of the area, to see what those people say. Are there stories in that area about little beings? And I think there are. I'm not 100% sure, but that's how I would go about with the mummy thing. It's a little confusing. I know we have the bodies, but because there's so many and they look so weird and they're mummified, to me, it's kind of like, it's almost like a deer in a headlight. But now that we have the mummies, like I said, I would look in the caves, try to find a live one, and I would look at the old stories to see what's going on. What have people said about them?
And I'll have to do this real quick for the radio audience. I'm putting up quotation signs, bodies, right? Because there's a lot of people out there who are just so offended that you would even consider that these things are real. Like, how can you say these things are real? They look obviously fake. And I can understand where that comes from, because I felt the same way about that. But again, you're coming to a conclusion without doing any sort of vetting on finding out if it's real or not. You're just going off of an appearance. A lot of people say, oh, it looks like E.T. It looks like they made it after E.T. Okay, you've heard about art imitating life, life imitating art. What came first, chicken or the egg? Is E.T. modeled after one of these things? You got to ask yourself that. To me, the thing kind of resembles the thing from Virginia. I don't know. I mean, there's just so many questions out there and theories that you can put forth. And I think the practice just needs to be, regardless on how you feel about any evidence that's being presented, let's sit on it. Let's put it on the shelf. Let's throw everything we can at it and then throw it away or keep it. But just give it the chance, right? Because you would hate to find out that you threw something away that was the real deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if you do the work and you spend the work on it and it turns out to all be a hoax, I think that's very informative as well, because it will be like, well, okay, how can we prevent this in the future? What are the lessons we learned? So either way, it's good to learn, if it turns out to be real or not. But yeah, you're right. We do need to do the work. Yeah, and going back to that framework thing, like I said, we need the disclosure. Oh, go ahead.
So right there. Yep, we're going to break right now. Everybody, it's getting hot in here. It's getting spicy. The conversation is going into the last 30 minutes of the show here with our guest, Wild Trees, microbiologist. We touched some interesting things, I got to say. And there's a lot more to come. You guys don't go anywhere. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. Stay tuned. All right, clear. Awesome stuff, Wild Trees. I mean, I already knew because we talked before. I was like, Wild Trees has to come back because just being able to pick your brain and kind of have this dance with you is just exactly what I need. You know what I mean? It's like it does that thing for me, man. So I appreciate you coming in and bringing your knowledge and your perspective, because I think you dropped a few jewels that, like I said, people just haven't thought about yet. And I think, when you do things like that, it's something that helps move the needle forward. And that's the whole theme that I have on this show is we got to have conversations that move the needle. You know what I mean? If it's not doing that, then what are we doing?
Right. Yeah. Like I said, just stagnating and just, yeah. And if somebody can be inspired to think differently, a little bit laterally, then that's how we make progress. We kind of outsource it. Everybody makes a little bit of progress. What about that? I'm really interested in the Las Vegas alien incident that happened last summer. I'd love to talk about.
Let's do that. Yeah, I was about to bring it up, but we were running out of time. Perfect. Yeah, that's my wheelhouse as well. Because once again, a lot of people, I mean, there's so much that I'll just save it, man. I'll just save it. Brown Dwarf saying Rob G is making a tattoo with that needle. Yes, sir. I am on humanity, for humanity. That's what this is all about. When you listen to these shows, like I said, if you're enjoying this show, you should go back and watch the first show that Wild Trees was on. We had an awesome conversation then. And that's the thing. The people don't have to be here live to hear it now. As long as the conversation is had, it's here forever for you to come back to, hopping in the archives and jumping in and getting some of this stuff that's going to move. It'll get your mind going and kind of get you moving the conversation forward. You know what I mean? I stress that, man. And that's why I'm so passionate about what we're doing here, man, because it's just so awesome to be able to talk to somebody that is doing exactly that. You know what I mean? Like, you're out there teaching people about nature. Like, that's an important thing there. You know what I mean? And just everything that you're into and in the perspective that you have. And that's why I like bringing guests like you on the show.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad you invited me. Yeah, and had a great conversation. It's very stimulating
Yes,
to talk.
sir. Yes, sir. And they love you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a lot of people. I don't know. I like talking to people. Some people, I love listening to their stories. Like, if they had paranormal experience, I love listening to their stories, and then I share like there's one guy named Billy. We interviewed him. I first started off doing a show called Black Lotus Live on a channel called Black Lotus Productions, and we did a show on black-eyed children, and which I'm fascinated by.
Yes.
And we had a guy named Billy, and he'd had a full-blown black-eyed child experience that they came to his front door, the whole 9 yards. And I explained it to him as a biologist, like what I thought might have been going on. And I think it helped him out. It gave him a new perspective. Basically, I told him, I was like, it sounds a hypothesis I have. It's not 100% proven. It's just an idea. But I have an idea that these black-eyed children are shapeshifters, and I believe they feed on fear. And I was like, I think maybe they were getting you scared, and that's their goal. They were feeding off of you, because they eventually left them. They just left them alone after they were banging on the door and saying, let us in, let us in. And I told them, I was like, they probably got full. Their bellies were full. They were feeding off your fear, and that's why they left. And I mentioned how predators greatly outnumber their prey. There's very few lions to the zebras. That's probably why you don't see black-eyed children that often, because they're predators. They eat on fear. And I don't know. We just had a good conversation. And he sounded like he got some kind of closure, or, that was a traumatic experience, but he was able to look at it somewhere a new way, and maybe it reshaped his thought process.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I said when you said you're scientists within the paranormal. I mean, that just makes so much sense. It's like it's a needed thing or just a viewpoint in as far as how this phenomenon is being looked at. I mean, I would wonder. It's like they say there's organisms that live. They're so small. They live in water, and water's in the air, and all that good stuff, right? So, you then go down a rabbit hole of, are some of these things we see in the sky made up of organisms? You know what I mean? And if you were able to examine one, would you find that to be the case? And yeah, it's a whole nother rabbit hole we could definitely jump down, but we got about 30 seconds here when we come back. And guys, I did get your questions so far. I just want to let you know, I think I caught, there's only been 2. Come on, guys. I know you have some awesome questions for Wild Trees, unless we've answered all of them. I mean, we have covered a lot of different stuff, so it could be the case.
Yeah, any question you have, Bigfoot, doesn't matter, aliens, Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster, spontaneous human, I mean, anything, go ahead and ask it.
Ooh.
I will give it a shot for sure.
Sounds like the lineup for the next show when we have you on again. So here we go, 3 seconds. All right, everybody, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. We are on hour 1.5. Again, on the back half of the interview here, we have about 23 more minutes with Wild Trees here. Make sure you get your questions in. We're going to be asking questions. We're going to jump into some more of this topic. But once again, we are all traveling space on this rock. We're space travelers. Consider taking the next step and joining the club. You can join our Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers Club for as little as $5 buckaroonies. Consider joining as we jump back into the conversation with Wild Trees. Over the break, you were talking about the Las Vegas ET incident. What did you want to say about that? Because I have some opinions on that sighting as well.
The Las Vegas incident happened last summer, okay, a little bit over a year ago. And we got a lot of evidence out of it. We got a 911 call. We have a video of the backyard. We have Inside Edition, interviewed the family. They drew drawings of the aliens. We got a lot of stuff out of it. Now, number one, I 100% think it happened. I think, you have the whole family saw it. Everybody's vouching for it. I 100% think it happened. It's fascinating to me. It's fascinating because it reminds me of all these classic stories we read as children, like the Hopkinsville Goblins. You remember that one? Yeah,
yes.
Out in Kentucky.
Yes.
And I could just go on and on. All these classic stories we read as kids, where the aliens come down and they interact with humans. Everybody's scared. And to me, it's fascinating. This happened last year. This is a modern, classic alien story, and I 100% think it happened. So, to me, it's just fascinating that we have one of those, and it happened. And overall, I think it's real, and it's so interesting. I feel sorry for the family. They all seem very traumatized by the events, which happens. But there's stuff that happened afterwards. They said the paranormal stuff kept happening even after the incident. They had the residual effect. But those are just my quick hot take. I'm dying to hear what you think about that case. What are your thoughts?
Yes. Okay. So we had a guest on recently. Can't recall his name. But the guy, he has a channel and he's been looking deep into that sighting. He's 100% on board with it. But I think he's a little off on the theory here, because there was a lot that came out with that. There were CGI things that came out and they said this is the ET, and there was some little creature crawling around. It's like, nah, that's not it. Then there was the theory that these things were right at the fence, like they said, you see the shadow and then the head sticking above. I don't believe that to be the case either. There's a video floating around, and I wish I had it queued to play for you now, but it shows things inside of the forklift. Exactly what the kid reported. So, and here's the thing. The description that he gave was like they're 8, 9, 10 feet with big shiny eyes. In the video, and I have it actually on my page, if anybody wants to go back and look, it's on my page. You can see two things inside of the cab of the forklift, and you can see like the eye is glowing, in the head looks like a shadow, but the eyes look white, and you can see it blink, and then it zooms. You can zoom in, and you see it blink like an organic, actual blink. And the other thing with that is that when you see them walk through that gate, they're not looking over here to the where the fence is at. They're looking over there where the forklift is. So when they get scared and turn around and come back out, it all lines up with the entity that's shown inside the forklift. And I think I don't know why people keep hanging on that video or the theory of the shadow coming by the fence. They're not looking at that at all. You can see that. So I think it's 100% real. I don't know if I buy it being tied to the what appears to be a shooting star. I don't know if that's connected because it was seen across multiple states. So that means it was really high up, and the arc would have cleared where they were. It wouldn't have landed right there in the backyard of that shooting star. So I don't think the two are connected. What do you think about that? The shooting star? Maybe you have a different perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's curious that that happened the same night and it was caught on the camera. But yeah, to me, there's not there's not enough connective tissue connecting both events. I don't know. So yeah, I think I don't know what to think about that. I am curious about if it was a meteor, has anybody caught it? You know, meteors are very expensive. I saw this video of a guy who follows and tracks meteors all over the earth. And then he flies to the area and he uses a metal detector and he finds them and he sells them for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So anybody found if it is a meteor, has anybody found it?
Good question.
There was I don't know if there is a connection between those two. Yeah.
There was also the video because you talked about the Hopkinsville, which to me, I've covered that case multiple times. We had Geraldine Stitt. I think she's like the granddaughter of the family that was in the house. We had her on the show back in July. And I came on and I couldn't wait to talk to her because I had a theory just based off of the story and the description of these entities. I told a story of I went to there was a video. This is before. Okay, so it started with a video that I saw online of what appeared to be an extraterrestrial walking down someone's driveway. You may have seen that. They call it the Dobby video.
Yeah, so, that's another that I spent a lot of time looking at. Wait, real fast.
Yes.
Is it the kid or is it not the kid? Is it a real alien?
Me, is not the kid, because if you freeze frame it, if you go through the frames, you can see the proportions don't line up with the child or a human being at all. The feet are pointed out like this. If you catch a frame, you see how low the hand hangs, and it looks like the shape of a claw. It lines up with the Hopkinsville ET. Because when I found that video, I'm like, okay, I've never seen an alien or heard of an alien with floppy ears. So I go and I look at an alien timeline that somebody put together, showed all the reported aliens since Roswell. Okay. And the only one in the list out of like 40 different descriptions with floppy ears was the Hopkinsville ET. So I went in, looked further into the Hopkinsville, and too many of things lined up, like the color, it being all one color, silver, like from head to toe, the floppy ears, the claws at the end of the hands, and the fact that it was trying to get in the person's house because their ring camera caught it leading from the front. Yeah. And when have you ever heard of an extraterrestrial that couldn't just materialize inside your house?
Right.
Hopkinsville, and then this one. So there's just a lot of things that point to them being similar than not, and it doesn't really line up with any other ET. Now, the Hellier series with Newkirk's, they were covering the Hopkinsville ET, and they had something similar in their film or their documentary that showed like this gray thing. Sometimes it didn't have ears, sometimes it did, but even in that, they still kind of line up with each other. So, you know, I feel like that Dobby ET video is real. I feel like that's video of something that isn't human walking down someone's driveway. And then that goes to the point again where I was saying throwing away evidence without really vetting it.
Yeah.
The skeptics all admit that whatever is in the video is real. They
Yes.
just say it's a kid with underwear on his head.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
it line up with that? What do you think?
I always thought there was something else to it. Yeah. And then, it's funny because they would ask the kid was there with his mom. They're like, they just asked him point blank, was it you with underwear? And the kid is just, I mean, he's laughing a little bit because, he's a kid, but he's like, no, it's not me. So I know kids lie, but I don't know. I was like, I believe him. I don't think it was him, like I don't know. I'm with you. I think it's something really anomalous. Just the way it was like walking, and it's just very strange.
And this is for you. This is for you. For the radio audience, we're watching the video with this thing walking down the driveway. That's not a human.
That's freaky, man. It
If you look at for the radio audience, if you look up the video, it's called Dobby Goblin, Dobby Goblin. You'll see this thing, all one color, uniform color, walking down a driveway. And if you go through it frame by frame, you will see frames that cannot be human. I'll try to stop it in one.
Where did this happen?
La Junta, Colorado. Okay, so just that. You can see the contrast, and this is the thing I point out. You can see the contrast in the car, the different shades and colors. Why would this thing be uniformly one color if it's a kid with underwear on his head? It doesn't make sense. You would see the different color variations if it's a kid. So I said, okay, does this kid have a full body white full body suit that's head to toe uniform, same color? Because that's the only thing that could lead to this. Look at that.
Too weird.
You tell me how that's a human. Just tell me how that's a human. Once again, for the radio audience, you guys have to watch this video. It's the Dobby Goblin video, which we're showing here on the YouTube channel. And it is, in my opinion, something, I'm not going to say it's alien because we don't know what it is or where it's from. It could be terrestrial, could be a cryptid, could be anything. But there just isn't anything that says it's human. That's what I'll say.
And when it walks around, it almost looks like it's unsteady.
Yeah, like it doesn't not used to our gravity or something like that, right?
Yeah, it kind of like sways around like drunkenly, making me think it's not from here or maybe it crashed here. It's just his whole body is just very spastic. Does not look comfortable.
Okay, that's the shot that I'm talking about. Look at that shot. Look at that right hand and how far it hangs down below the crotch area. That lines up with the claw on the Hopkinsville Goblin. Just go do your research on it, guys. If you compare the two. And like I said, if you can show me something that says it isn't what it is, and you can show that it's, a kid with underwear, and point it out. But it's been, I've scoured the internet for years after I found this, and there is nothing out there that debunks this in that way. It's just people to say, no, it's a kid with underwear. And there isn't anything in the video that would even point to that being true. So with that being said, say again.
It's so skinny too. Its legs are
way skinnier than that kid is. And okay, it's the same height roughly. Yeah, I'll give you that. That's about the only thing that lines up. But aren't the Greys about 3 to 4 feet tall?
Yeah.
So they would be about the size of a 9-year-old kid, right? So just because it's the same height doesn't mean it's the kid or it's close to the same height. There's too many other things that say that it isn't. So I want to make sure that we get these questions in here. So I have a question here from Super Crazy Movie Geek. Do you think the aliens are responsible for killing cattle to get nutrients or maybe for some other reason?
Great question. I was actually just watching Red Panda Koala's video on cattle mutilation today. That's a great channel, by the way. And NIDS, NIDS is an organization run by Robert Bigelow. They ran a study on cattle mutilation. We're talking about Robert Bigelow. What does NIDS stand for? It stands for, I don't know what it stands for. Anyway, so the NIDS organization that Robert Bigelow ran, they did a study on cattle mutilation. And they thought one of the causes of cattle mutilation was someone or some group of people checking on sampling cattle for mad cow disease. So mad cow disease is a prion type of disease. Prions are fascinating. Basically, what happens is, unfortunately, farmers or ranchers, they'll feed cattle, other cattle, just to save money, I guess. They'll grind up a cow, including its brain, and they'll feed it to another cow. And when you do that, sometimes you get mad cow disease. And then if a human comes in contact with you, it's really bad. I mean, it's a fatal disease. Prions are actually a protein. So it's a microscopic structure. And that protein is bent out of shape, and it's not the way it's supposed to. It's in your brain, right? And when that protein comes in contact with a healthy protein, it also bends it to look like itself and corrupts it. And it's a cycle. It's like a domino falling. It reminds me of a zombies. You know how a zombie's infected, it'll bite you. You'll become a zombie. You'll bite another zombie. And that's how a prion works. It's a simplified version, but prions make you act like a zombie, but the way they work, it's kind of like a zombie. Like I said, a prion is a protein, a microscopic structure, and it's crooked, and it touches your healthy one, and it makes it crooked too, and then it spreads. Anyway, so some people were saying that some organization was testing cows. So I don't think they said it, but they said it might have been a government organization. So I guess what they're implying is that some cattle mutilations are caused by a mysterious government organization that's secretly testing cattle in areas for prion disease to prevent it, I guess, from spreading. And I guess the reason they would do it secretly is not to scare anybody, because, if I heard that, like, the government has been testing for prion diseases in my area, I could see how it would disrupt the beef industry in America. I don't know if you know this, but beef in America is highly subsidized, just like corn. Highly subsidized. What that means is, if you eat a hamburger, right? I'm just making up the numbers as an example to prove a point. But you go to the store, you buy a hamburger, the hamburger costs you $5. Okay, the government is paying for a lot of that price of the hamburger, by subsidies. If the government was not subsidizing that hamburger, maybe it'd be close to $10 or $15.
Wow.
So in America, when you buy beef, you're actually getting it at a super discount. Same thing with corn. Anyway, that's to say that beef is a big industry. It's a big form of food in America. So some people say that maybe some organization is testing it for this disease.
All right. So we got about 5 minutes. So I'm going to rapid fire these questions here. We got about 5 questions. So we got Kurt W75. You think you could find any microbiology or anything micro in to study in all these old tombs, like in Colombia or inside any pyramids around the world? They oddly seem to be placed in energy hotspots.
Okay, interesting. Yes, there are life in tombs. A natural tomb is like a cave. So cave systems, sometimes they get sealed off by like an avalanche, and inside they're just like a pristine environment. And so, yes, it could be dangerous, but very exciting. Yes, tombs. I would go in there once again with my Q-tip, and you could find, ancient bacteria, ancient fungus, ancient seeds, ancient spores. So to answer your question, yes, that's a good idea. Maybe a bad idea, because you don't know what you're going to unearth. But there is life, microbiology life in tombs. Yes.
All right. Lovely Love asks, Wild Trees, you ever seen a hellbender?
I've seen pictures of them. Yeah, I think they're a type of salamander. Yeah, and I think they're endangered as well. I've never seen one in the wild, if that's your question. I am familiar with them, and I believe they're endangered. Very cool salamanders.
Okay, and then Super Crazy Movie Geek asks, do you think the Earth is being protected by some alien groups from being invaded by some malevolent alien groups?
Okay, good question. I do think there's multiple groups visiting us. I think some of them are bad and some of them are good. Because you look at the UFO cases, right? Yeah, 90% of them are grays, but then 10% are just weird, random, one-off aliens. They all look like a lobster. It looked like the Michelin Man. Just weird. It makes me think that there's multiple things going on. And yeah, I believe some of them have good intentions and some of them are protecting us. Just the way we protect hellbenders, for example. They're endangered. There are people actively protecting this hellbender. So yes, I do think that's going on. It makes sense.
Cody Eiler's asking, what about the implants?
Okay, what about the implants? Yeah. Lua Lozando talked about implants. He saw an implant move around. As far as tracking, so I do think implants happen. So the question is, why do they happen? I don't know about tracking. I don't know, because I think they could track you pretty easily. Humans don't really, like a human just goes to his house and work. I'm sorry, it's kind of depressing. We don't really go, it's pretty easy to track it. So other people say that maybe the implants are there for monitoring your health. That's something, like your vital sign, or maybe for helping you in some reason. So yeah, I do think implants happen. I'm not sure if it's for if it's for tracking people. It could be for other reasons. Like I said, maybe monitoring health things, or maybe it could be. I mean, I've tracked animals when I caught little tiny beetles. And I didn't put implants in it, but I needed to keep track of them, where they were going. These beetles, they fit in my pinky nail. That's how small they were. So what I would do is puncture a little hole in their shell. It didn't hurt them at all, but I would puncture little codes on their shell. So when I re-caught them, I knew where they were moving around. So yeah, I do have implants for tracking. But yeah, those are my thoughts. I think they're real. Yeah.
Cosmic Joe says, what was the biggest insect that you have ever encountered?
Oh, good question. Biggest insect I ever encountered. Well, probably a sphinx moth. Yeah. They're very cool looking. Yeah. So a sphinx moth is a type of moth, and they're very furry. Probably makes them look bigger than they really are because they expand. But yeah, they get about this big maybe. So yeah, beautiful pink sphinx moths. We used to have larger insects, like in the prehistoric times. We had really, really large dragonflies. There's some odd cases of people, like cryptozoological people, seeing large dragonflies. One interesting fact about why the insects got so big back in the prehistoric times, the air was thicker. The air was actually thicker, so they could support these. It was easier for a large insect to fly. It was easier for everybody to fly because it was just a thicker atmosphere. Very cool.
All right. Kira's asking you a Sasquatch question. Do you think trees can be portals for Sasquatch? Is that possible? Is biological thing connecting them together?
Okay, can trees be portals? Well, trees are very interesting. People just look at them and they think, well, it's a tree, pretty cool. But we know that they communicate with each other. They have an economy. So when you go down to the root system, they could actually talk to each other, and they could lend each other nutrients. If this tree is doing bad, this tree will give him some of its nutrients, and then they'll pay him back. So there's this whole system going on. So there's definitely more to trees than meets the eye, and more that we have discovered. So yeah, I definitely think there's probably a connection with them and Bigfoot. Yes, possibly a portal. Yeah, I mean, the majority of Bigfoot are found in forests, and the majority of forests are made of trees. So surely there must be some kind of connection going on there. Yes.
Okay, last question. You got about 30 seconds for this one. Soon after disclosure, do you think there will be a live television event where aliens land to do a meet and greet with Earth representatives and be introduced to our world?
No, I don't think that'll happen, but I do think it's a bad idea to disclose. I mean, it's better to disclose than not to disclose, but I've been asking this question for a long time. Now people are asking it also. I think that when disclosure happens, the aliens will act differently. The bad ones will act differently. I think they'll ramp up their aggression. So I think there are downsides to disclosure. Unfortunately, it's not all good. I think they will change their attitude. They will act differently. We will see them more. And if they're doing bad things, I think they'll just do them more, because it's like we're out in the open, we're caught, So unfortunately, I think there's downsides to disclosure. I'm not sure I don't think that scenario will happen. I think we will see them more, but that specific scenario, I'm not sure if it will happen. Maybe the good ones. Okay, well, maybe the good ones will do that. If there are some really benevolent ones, they might do that. But I know for sure there's some that are not good. They won't do that, but they will probably be more aggressive toward us.
All right, you got about 10 seconds to let everybody know where they can find you.
All right, if everybody watches this, I could get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm at 800. So if you're watching now, or if you're watching in the future, please go to Biologist Wild Trees. You could just type that into YouTube. Type it into Google, and you'll see my YouTube page. We could get ourselves to 1,000, and I could post more about movies and the paranormal and science and video games, which is what I love.
All right. Appreciate you, Wild Trees. You've been awesome. We got to do a part 3. Everybody show your love. Go to Wild Trees YouTube page as we get ready to go ahead and go into our free right here on Spaced Out Radio. You guys don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. It's going to be action
You're
packed.
listening to After Hours with Mr. Rob G on the only place where you can own the night. Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio. You've tuned your dial to the right frequency.
All right, Wild Trees, take care. I got to play this commercial.
Thank you, sir. See you later.
Talk soon. Yep.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. After hour number 3 with me, your host, Mr. Rob G. As we get ready to come back from our radio break, just stay tuned. We'll get into some Steve Stockton and also some weird news. Welcome back, everyone, to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. We are in hour number 3 already. I want to thank our guest, Wild Trees, for coming in and being an awesome guest tonight. Also, definitely want to make sure that if you missed any of this show, you hop right in our archives because they're absolutely free. YouTube.com/@spacedoutradio, where the options are endless, guys. As we go ahead and get ready to jump into our hour 3. So yeah, just want to go ahead and say thanks for Wild Trees, microbiologist, coming on in. We had an awesome conversation. The first conversation is in the archives, and we'll definitely be having them back. I know you guys enjoy stimulating conversation to get your mind going. The motto we have over on the social dig is the topics that keep you talking and the talk that keeps you thinking. And on this channel, we are having conversations that move the needle. So awesome stuff as always. As we go ahead and get ready to jump into it, it's going to be a little different today because what we're going to do is we're going to listen to some Steve Stockton, but it's actually a little extended. So this one is going to run us pretty close to our break. And I want to make sure that you don't go anywhere, because after we come back, and we'll actually talk before the break, but once we come back from that break, I have a new thing I wanted to try. It was just a little something that's on my mind, a little segment that we'll call Unapologetically Mr. Rob G. And just something I had on my mind, right? So maybe it's like a Rob 101. I don't know. But with that being said, let's get ready to flip the script and get into some Steve Stockton Tales Untold, Missing Person Mysteries. As we go ahead and get that started, here we go.
Welcome to Tales Untold and Missing Persons Mysteries on Spaced Out Radio's After Hours. My name is Steve Stockton, and I'm here to take you on a journey of mysteries, legends, and true stories. Come, join me on this strange adventure of Tales Untold and Missing Person Mysteries. Did you ever wonder why, in recent years, more and more people seem to be disappearing from our national parks, and at such a higher rate than ever before? While many see these occurrences as unexplainable or seem to think they have a reasonable, rational, or even scientific explanation for it all, there are some of us who know better. Some of us who think otherwise. From UFO and Bigfoot sightings to the bizarre and unexplained missing 411 clusters, many of us are left scratching our heads and wondering what is going on out there in the woods. While there are many folk tales and legends into who or what is lurking out there in the woods and forests all around the world, today we're going to focus on one legend in particular, the legend of the Fae or fairy people. While most people seem to think of them as helpful, beautiful, and sparkly, if not a little bit mischievous when thinking of fairies, there are others who have heard the real legends, the real terrifying and strange encounters with these mystical beings in the woods, and have had our visions of them forever changed because of it. Let's take a walk through the deepest, darkest parts of the forest and explain the shockingly terrifying world of the Fae. beings, be sure not to mention it by name. More commonly, they are referred to as the little people or the hidden people, so as not to summon them unknowingly. So, the people who believe this legend of the fairies or the fae being fallen, whether angel or otherwise, believe they are neither good enough for heaven nor bad enough for hell below. They can appear and disappear at will, which makes it very easy for them to stalk and sneak up on their target. In 1962, in southern England, a farmer's wife reported getting lost in a very remote area of wilderness known to this day as the Berkshire Downs. She recalls how she didn't even realize she was losing her way and became very panicked and confused all of a sudden. She claims to have never switched course and headed the entire time in the same and correct direction towards where she originally intended to go. What she realized later on, though, was that she was actually moving further and further into more remote and desolate parts of the woods, away from any other form of civilization. Eventually, she got very tired and stopped for a few minutes. This is when she heard a sort of murmuring or mumbling coming from somewhere near her, although exactly where she couldn't be sure, as even though it was a clear and sunny day, she couldn't see anyone or anything to accompany the strange voice. Suddenly, as she sat there confused and trying to find the source of the small voice she thought she was hearing, a little person stepped out of the shadows of the woods and directly into her path. The bizarre thing here, though, the figure she describes as most likely male and dressed all in green appeared behind her, though somehow she claims she could see him and knew for a fact he was there. Without saying a word, the little man turned her around and pointed her to the right path back to her home. The figure then disappeared without a trace right before her eyes, and it was only while talking to her husband later on and recounting her bizarre and seemingly stress-induced experience did she realize she had encountered one of the fae. Lucky for her, this was one of the helpful ones, and not the more commonly known ones who purposefully lure unsuspecting wanderers off their track and bring them to places unknown where they will never be able to find their way back. In Celtic lore, the fae, or little people, are said to live underground, and any travelers who either knowingly or unknowingly trespass too near these hidden places are said to go missing and are never seen or heard from again. Many people who have had an encounter have reported to being in a place they had never seen or knew existed before, seemingly in the blink of an eye, with no knowledge or recollection of how they got there. Although this seemingly new place was definitely not where they were just a second ago, it still looked enough like where they had just been to make them question their own sanity. These places are familiar, yet unfamiliar, simply giving one an instinctual feeling that they are somewhere other. When they finally, and seemingly just as suddenly, return to where they had left from, always much more time has passed than they had anticipated. With what seemed to be like mere minutes had actually been hours or even days in some cases. Now, let's go to the United States and explore the early Native American legends of Mount Shasta. There were many complaints of even the earliest native settlers on and near this particular mountain of members of their tribe, specifically their hunting parties, who would vanish without a trace, never to be seen or heard from again. This happened so often, in fact, they started to believe the whole area was cursed. They also spoke of a bright stone which traversed the mountain and seemingly swallowed people whole. They were convinced that this stone had something to do with the fairies. Do you believe this area could be cursed? What was this glowing stone? Do you believe that stone has the ability to open up, swallow someone, and close back? Or do you believe this was just a scary story to tell their children in the hopes of keeping them from wandering too far on the mountain alone? On the other side of the world, in northern Sweden, There's a man who, for the sake of this video and out of respect for his desire to remain anonymous, we'll call Joe. Throughout his childhood, Joe would go to his grandparents' house in a deeply wooded area with lots of trees and trails for a young boy to explore. When he was 10 years old, he and his family went to stay at his grandparents' house for the entire summer. Aside from the one main house, there were several smaller cabins on the property, which his grandparents owned, and his family would stay together in these series of cabins for the entirety of their summer vacation. Joe stayed with a group of his cousins in a cabin that was a little less than 100 feet away from his grandparents' main house. This was extremely desolate land, and the closest town was miles and miles away. There was also a lake on the property, and Joe and his cousin's cabin was the closest one to it as well. There's electricity, but no running water, and the family had to collect their own, as going to the nearest town to buy some wasn't a reasonable option, as it would have taken so long for them to get there and return. While the lake was directly in front of Joe's cabin, behind it were very deep, very dark, and very desolate woods. Joe's grandfather would tell many stories to the family about alleged encounters he had had while in those woods, encounters which he didn't know how to explain, as there seemed to be no known words to describe what he was seeing and or experiencing. Joe himself said whenever he was hiking or just wandering around these woods, he always got this sort of creepy and eerie feeling, which he could never shake nor never explain. On numerous occasions, Joe reported seeing little people who would appear and then vanish just as quickly and seemingly without a trace. He claims that when these little people would cross the dirt paths, anyone nearby would freeze in place until they had gone. Now, when his cousin heard Joe telling other family members these experiences he was having, he decided that on the next hike he took with Joe, he would bring it up to joke and possibly tease him about. Obviously, he wasn't a believer. The cousin laughed and pretended to freeze in place while telling Joe it seemed he had come across one of the little people's trails. The boy's grandfather, however, wasn't very happy about this joke and reprimanded the other boy not to ever joke about the little people, especially not while wandering in the woods. The subject was eventually dropped, and they all went home to their respective cabins to retire for the night. In the middle of the night, however, Joe recalls being awakened by some sort of noise outside the cabin. The noise seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, all around the cabin, instead of just one singular place. He likened the noise to bears scratching at the outside of the cabin. It also sounded simultaneously like pebbles or giant raindrops were falling down onto the roof and running down the sides of the cabin. Suddenly, the scratching sounds seemed to be coming from under Joe and his cousin's beds. They were frozen in fear, frozen in place, if you will, with terror from the sound coming from right under where they were each respectively sitting. Eventually, they summoned the courage to get up and run as fast as they could to their grandparents' cabin to tell them what was going on. The next day, the two boys and their grandfather walked the same path in the woods as the day before, where their cousin had made the insult towards the little people, and they scattered candy all around and along the trails. As they did this, they profusely apologized for offending whatever it was in those woods that day and night. Joe thinks it was definitely the little people who had come to teach him and his cousin a lesson on manners and respect. Back in the United States in March of 1886, an Ohio newspaper article in the Bloomington Daily Leader came out involving a man and his daughter. This incident took place years before the article had come out, and the daughter's name is still unknown, while the man's name is Andy. We will call his daughter Sarah for the purpose of this story. Andy and Sarah were living in Dubuque County at the time. According to Andy, in her early teen years, his daughter started becoming sickly and ill all the time, and none of the doctors who examined or treated her seemed to be of any help. Whatever the illness was, it always seemed to return almost as quickly as it would leave. Because none of the physicians seemed to be able to figure out what was ailing her or how to cure it, Andy decided to take his daughter to a monastery and see a man named Father Bernard. Father Bernard was very well respected and considered very wise throughout the community, and upon hearing about Sarah's unexplainable illness, agreed to pray with the young girl. During one of their walks home from praying with Father Bernard, Sarah allegedly turned to her father and told him that it was all useless, that everything Father Bernard was doing wasn't going to help her, and eventually she would be taken by the Fae. Andy didn't pay attention at the time and thought his daughter was just feeling discouraged as she'd been sick for so long. About a year after she said this to him about the fairies, Sarah went missing. She seemed to have left everything behind and disappeared with only the clothes on her back. Searchers almost immediately dragged the creeks in the area and conducted foot searches deep into the neighboring woods for miles and miles, but no one ever found a single trace of Sarah. Because of the lack of any sign of her or evidence as to where she had gone, the locals and law enforcement set their sights on Andy as the culprit who had done something to his own daughter. However, luckily, before any charges were pressed against him, Sarah returned. The story she told as to what happened to her was unbelievable to most, and it's for you to decide now if you believe it or not. Sarah claimed that she had simply been traveling the country with the fairies the entire time she was gone. She recounted being in strange vehicles, invisible to the naked eye. The third day of her return, Sarah informed everyone that the Fae would soon be back for her and she would have to leave again with them. Indubitably, she left again not long after and was never seen or heard from again. The newspaper reported that Andy never changed his story about what had happened to his daughter, and when asked what he believed, he responded with the tales of the fairies from Ireland. Now, if you're thinking all of this talk of real fairies and the Fae folk has started perhaps with the modern-day versions of fairy tales and people letting their imagination run wild, then maybe think again.
All right, and that is Steve Stockton, Tales Untold and Missing Persons Mysteries. We want to thank Steve Stockton for being a part of the After Hours radio show. We do appreciate everything that he brings. And like I always said, Steve Stockton can read you a homework assignment and it'll sound creepy and spooky. Shout out to Steve Stockton and congratulations on the new kids. Steve, if you're listening out there, once again, appreciate you. And so, yeah, this was about fairies, the Fae, right? And this is part of the cryptid world, something I'm not really, had experience with. So I'm going to read something that'll take us into break about the Fae. For centuries, this is the myth and mystery of fairies. For centuries, fairies have captured the human imagination, appearing in folklore, literature, and art across diverse cultures. These mystical beings, often depicted as tiny magical creatures with wings, have long been associated with nature, enchantment, and mystery. Their stories have been passed down through generations, weaving themselves into the cultural fabric of societies from Europe to Asia and beyond. Fairies are both fascinating and elusive, representing a complex blend of myth, imagination, and belief in the supernatural. The concept of fairies has ancient roots, with stories of these creatures dating back to early civilizations. In European mythology, particularly Celtic and Norse traditions, fairies were often viewed as supernatural beings that lived in hidden realms, interacting with humans in mysterious and unpredictable ways. The word fairy itself comes from the Old French fairy, derived from the Latin fata, meaning fate, a term used to describe beings who control destiny. Early fairies were not always the benevolent creatures we see in the modern tales. They could be mischievous, dangerous, or even malevolent. In Celtic folklore, for instance, the city, or Eos Sea, were a race of powerful beings believed to live in the mountains or hills and were often associated with the other world. They were taught to be remnants of ancient gods and goddesses who lost their power when Christianity spread across Europe. These beings were both feared and revered, as they could bestow blessings or curses depending on how they were treated by humans. Norse mythology, too, is rich with stories of elves and other supernatural beings who may share many characteristics with fairies, from their secretive natures to their ability to influence human fate. One of the most consistent aspects of fairy mythology is their deep connection to nature. Fairies are often depicted as guardians of the natural world, living in forests, meadows, or by streams. This association has led to the belief that fairies have control over the elements such as water, air, and earth. In many cultures, fairies are seen as protectors of plants and animals. responsible for the balance of life in the natural environment. In Celtic tradition, fairies are closely tied to the changing seasons, with certain times of the year like Samhain or Beltane being considered particularly magical. During these periods, it was believed that the veil between the human world and the fairy world was thinnest, allowing for interaction between the two realms. Offerings of food, milk, or flowers were often left for fairies to ensure their goodwill, and it was considered wise to avoid disturbing their homes, such as fairy rings or ancient trees. Fairy rings, circular patterns of mushrooms that naturally occur in forests or fields, were often thought to be places where fairies danced. To disturb these rings was seen as dangerous, as it could invoke the wrath of the fairies. This connection to nature made fairies both enchanting and fearsome, as they were seen as protectors of the wild who could punish humans for their trespasses. As cultures evolved, so did the portrayal of fairies. While early fairy lore emphasized their capricious and sometimes dangerous nature, later literature, especially during the Renaissance and Victorian era, began to romanticize and soften their image. William Shakespeare's A Midnight Summer's Dream, written in the late 16th century, is a classic example of this shift. In the play, fairies such as Oberon, Titania, and Puck were mischievous, but ultimately benevolent creatures who influenced human affairs for both good and folly. Shakespeare's work helped establish the image of fairies as enchanting beings who live in a magical world parallel to our own. The Victorian era, in particular, embraced the idea of fairies as tiny, whimsical creatures who inhabited gardens and forests. Artists and writers of the time often portrayed fairies as delicate, childlike beings with butterfly wings, emphasizing their beauty and charm. The Pre-Raphaelite movement, for instance, featured numerous paintings of fairies and other mythological figures, capturing the Victorian fascination with the mystical and the magical. Fairies during this period also played a crucial role in shaping modern perceptions of fairies. Stories such as Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Peter Pan featured fairies as both helpers and tricksters, cementing their place in the collective imagination as magical beings with the power to grant wishes or influence fate. These stories are often portrayed fairies as intermediaries between the human world and the supernatural, adding an element of enchantment to everyday life. In modern times, fairies continue to capture the imagination of people around the world. From children's stories to fantasy novels and films, fairies have remained a staple of popular culture. Characters like Tinkerbell from J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan and the fairy's godmother from Charles Perrault's Cinderella have become iconic figures, symbolizing the magic and wonder that fairies bring to stories. Contemporary literature and media have also expanded the portrayal of fairies, often exploring darker or more complex aspects of their nature. In urban fantasy genres, fairies are frequently depicted as powerful, otherworldly beings who interact with humans in both magical and dangerous ways. Novels such as Holly Black's The Cruel Prince and Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thrones and Roses present fairies as morally ambiguous characters, blending traditional folklore with modern storytelling. Additionally, the New Age movement has embraced fairies as symbols of spiritual connection with nature. Many believe that fairies represent the unseen forces of the natural world, and some even claim to have had personal experiences or encounters with these beings. In this context, fairies are seen not only as mythological creatures, but also as spiritual guides or manifestations of nature's energy. So that's a little bit about fairies. I didn't really know this, right? So, this is a cryptid that a lot of people talk about having encounters with. They're definitely often talked about being in the forest. And that's actually pretty insightful to know the history on fairies. So we're going to get ready to go to commercial break here. We got about 30 seconds. And I want to get into some stuff, right? Like I said, we got something coming up called Unapologetically Mr. Rob G. And it's just a thought that I had on my mind. And it's kind of like a rant. You can call it almost like a Rob's rant sort of thing. And similar to a Day 101. And we're going to do that. We're going to also get into the UFO and weird, wild news coming up on the last 20-something minutes of the show. You guys don't go anywhere. Stay right where you're at, right here on Spaced Out Radio After Hours with me, your host, Mr. Rob G, as we get ready to take it home. I hope you guys are ready. See you when you get back. All right, clear. Good stuff. Good show so far, man. It's like I said, definitely want to thank Wild Trees if you were out there. Definitely appreciate you, guy. And CS has the right idea. CS is saying, press that like button, folks, if you wouldn't mind, right? It helps you know the whole spiel, helps the algorithm, helps the show get out there. You know, we're trying to get Spaced Out Radio to a new audience, to people who haven't really touched on the subject. And once again, don't be afraid to invite skeptics. We would love for skeptics to come into the audience. We think they're a valuable part of this conversation, and it's kind of good to be able to see things from different perspectives. So if you have skeptic friends or family, definitely invite them in. If you're on Twitter, if you're watching from Twitter or Twitch, hit whatever like button they have over there. I think it's a heart on X. Please go ahead and hit that. Just let everybody know that you like the show. Maybe even share the show. That would be pretty awesome if you consider doing that. And if you are here new on YouTube for the first time, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We do this 7 days a week. You got the after hours. I might as well tell you here. We got the after hours here Saturdays and Sundays from 8 p.m. Pacific until 11 p.m. Pacific. Then you got Dave Scott running the Woo Train Monday through Friday from 9 p.m. Pacific until midnight. And then you get Lee and Jax, Element 115 on Fridays, 8 p.m. Pacific until 9. So the whole idea is just 7 days a week. There's something going on right here at Spaced Out Radio. And our archives are completely free. So you can jump back. I mean, thousands of episodes, literally going back probably close to 10 years of awesome shows with some of your favorite people that have been interviewed here. And we're just continuing to do it. So definitely would appreciate you guys doing that, and would love to see you come back as we do what we can for the audience, try to put on the best show possible. So with that being said, we got about 2 minutes and 30 seconds before we come back from our break. And we're going to get in some more good stuff. I promise. Let me go ahead and get some things lined up here. Actually, see if anyone else is out here in the audience. Fast Hemi, you snuck in here. Fast Hemi, thanks for coming in. Dead Fish Cheese Spread also snuck in here. Amy WC. All these people snuck in here. Let me see. Jessica S. Appreciate you coming in. Let's see. Who else do we have? Came in later. I know I said Brown Dwarf, but I like saying Brown Dwarf. Brown Dwarf. Appreciate you, buddy. Rich Buddy. Appreciate you coming on in. Who else do we have here that I may have missed? Bim Jim. Thank you for coming on in. We appreciate you showing up at the after hours tonight. Let's see. Moving back here. Richard Minnick. Did I say Richard Minnick? I'm going to say it again. Richard Minnick, thanks for coming on in. Let's see. Who else do we have? FAP. Appreciate you coming in. Blue Cruise. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate you. Kurt W75. Thank you for coming in. Polly Rotterman. Polly, thanks for coming in. Joe Monk, thanks for coming on in. As we got about a minute till we come back from break. Let me go ahead and get us all set up here. About 45 seconds left before we come back from break. I really hope everybody's having a great time tonight. Oh, also, might as well say this. As Dave said yesterday, there will be no show tomorrow. There will be a show tomorrow, but it'll be a replay from the archive because we have some SOR business that we have to tend to tomorrow. So the chat will be live though. So definitely come on in. You'll be able to chat with everyone, and we'll pick a really, really good replay for you guys. And then Dave will be back Monday, and we'll be doing it all over again right here on the After Hours next weekend. All right, about 15 seconds to go here. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio, After Hour 2.5. You're on the After Hours radio show. We're about to bring it home. We're getting ready to go home, guys. 22 minutes left till the show is over. Don't forget, anything you missed tonight, which was an awesome show, jump in our archives. They're absolutely free. YouTube.com/@spacedoutradio. There is a plethora of options for you. Make sure you guys jump in there and take advantage of that as we get ready to go ahead and jump into our next segment. This was just something that I had on my mind. I was like, okay, we're doing a little different things here on Saturday today. So let's go ahead and do something a little different. So this, once again, let me give a disclaimer. These thoughts don't reflect on Spaced Out Radio and are thoughts of Mr. Rob G. And that's how I want to make sure that I lay it out, because a little disclaimer before we go ahead and jump into this, because it's unapologetically Mr. Rob G.
You're an irredeemable monster!
Come here, I'm gonna eat you! Get in my belly!
Kick him in the nard! He doesn't have nard! Do it! Wolfman's got nard! You're a monster!
All right. Unapologetically Mr. Rob G. So I wanted to kind of talk about some things here, some things that are on my mind when I think about ufology and the best way forward, because what we try to do on this show is we try to do things or have conversations that move the needle. And it's all about progression. Sometimes the conversations that you have to get on that path or to get where you're going, sometimes they're tough conversations, right? So, that's why I gave the disclaimer before I go ahead and say what I'm about to say, or just kind of go over what I'm about to go over. The topic is going to be UFO receipts. Yeah, UFO receipts. And I'm going to read a little something. I'll kind of spin off of something. I wanted to make sure I covered all the key points on this. So starting out, you got to ask the question, why are UFO receipts important? Why is that a thing? Why would somebody within ufology be saying UFO receipts, right? Some say that receipts aren't important when you talk to certain people within ufology. Some of you may be in the audience tonight, may feel that the receipts aren't important because, as a lot of people say, disclosure is personal, right? And that's the thing. When we talk about disclosure being personal, I feel like that statement is definitely true, but it's only within our community, right? Because we all know that these things are here. So if someone were to step forward and an experiencer that just has a story with no receipts, we can, based on our experience in that we've had, we can align with that and say, yeah, that's an experience, right? And kind of take that for what it is and kind of, say that adds to the overall story and that adds to the data that we need to collect. Now, I do agree that the experience is the backbone of the disclosure conversation, but you got to ask yourself this. If in this community, all we had were the stories of our encounters alone, you got to ask yourself, where would we be within the overall conversation when it comes to those outside of ufology who are looking for receipts in order to get some sort of validation or just to understand that things are going on as far as UFOs go. With that being said, I think we can agree that if a specific person, and this is the thing, this is the reason why, I'm even saying this, because I think we can agree that if a specific person is being targeted by the phenomena, right? Just multiple experiences, recurring contact with ETs, like clockwork. You have some people, as we talked to Wild Trees earlier, some people have had absolutely no experiences their entire life. Some people have had only one and nothing since. It's been 20, 30 years since that one experience and they haven't had anything else. So there are those groups. So when you're looking at that with someone that has multiple contacts, you have to feel like it's more than personal at that point. And the reason why I feel like that is because if you are being contacted multiple times, you have to look at it as you're likely being targeted, right, by these ETs in order to share this with the rest of humanity in the form of receipts. Because what you're doing is you are in a position for those who have never had an experience, you are kind of able to help bridge the gap for them, right? So even though disclosure is technically personal, which I do agree with, when you're having all these encounters, I think it's almost a duty to put yourself in a position to capture data, because we talk about humanity-led disclosure, and that's data that we've all curated, right? So don't we all essentially line up clamoring to see the latest UFO footage? I think that counts for most of us. Anytime Corbell drops a video or anytime someone comes on the show and they have footage to show, everyone lines up to see that footage, right? Those are receipts. Don't most people in our community insist when we have the conversation, most people, I won't say all, but don't most people in the community insist that the government comes with the goods on UFOs? I think that's a thing. I've sat in the audience many a times, and and looking at it from the view of people in the chat, people want to see receipts. People want to see the government show bodies. They also want to get them to come forward and just admit that they have what they have, right? Once again, some people never see anything anomalous. Some see once and never again. Just consider pulling out your cameras, right? We all carry these cell phones. You hear Neil deGrasse Tyson sit up and make statements like, well, everyone has a camera. There's X amount of million cameras. It's a little snarky and hints of sarcasm, when he's saying things like that. But it's also true. Like, we have the ability to capture these things, and I'm just really talking to people that feel like I'd rather just have the experience and not capture data. That could, when you think about the greater good of humanity and you think about your descendants, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the people that are going to inherit this earth after we're gone, they are depending on your data. It would seem almost like a selfish thing to take your data to the grave. We already know there's a line drawn between humanity and the government. We hope they'll come out with information, but we know likely it's going to be on the back of us as experiencers in humanity. So everybody who has something to add to the story should be stepping forward, whether it's just a story or whether you have receipts, right? But the idea is to kind of catalog or put together something that allows us to take that next step to get to disclosure. So with that being said, you know, there's other methods. There's scientific methods as well, scientific measurements. We talked to Tom King the other day. He has a sky watching setup. You know, they have the UFO DAP, which is, you know, being triggered by things that are moving in the sky. Selflessly, he's doing that to add to the data for all of us. So I think we all have a part to play in this. And it's like, it's a situation where, yeah, it's personal for every one of us, but we also have to come together like we do in these chat rooms when we watch these shows to help move this thing forward. So let's share data. Let's move the needle for humanity, not just for yourself, for humanity, right? So I'll look in the chat because I do want to know if anyone has anything to say about that. You know, it's just a perspective, and I don't mean to offend anyone if that came across as offensive, but I hope that at least it was delivered in a way that where you can, if you're open-minded about the conversation, where you can see where the value would be in a person who has multiple recurring experiences being targeted by extraterrestrials potentially. The reason is that they want you to share this information with the rest of the world. Like, you're a key in getting this out there to the people that just will never have an experience, right? So with that being said, let me go ahead and take a look here. Just taking a look here. Okay, yeah, okay. I don't see any objections. Okay. So with that being said, that's where I'll leave it. I'll just leave it on the table, right? Welcome to the show. Ask what would qualify as a valid UFO receipt. Just whatever you can capture, right? There's some people that have one experience, maybe two, and they're not in a position to capture the data. That's understandable. But I feel like if you have 15, if you can list 15 different encounters, then after the third one, it should be about capturing the data. If this is something that keeps recurring, some people have had experiences their whole life since young kids and still have experiences as older adults. So it's just like, hey, okay, well, the likelihood of you having another experience is pretty high based on the history that you've had with these, whatever they are. So it'd be incumbent on you to just think about pulling the camera out. We all have phones. Just pull the camera out next time, right? Because then we can shut people up like Neil deGrasse Tyson, or because he makes a point, right? Even though it sounds snarky, he makes a point. We have the ability to capture the data, and we should really be trying to do that. And that goes for any part of this phenomenon, whether it's UFOs, whether it's going in the forest for Bigfoot, whether it's, you know, searching out the paranormal, whatever data you can capture, however you can capture it, right, is just very important to the overall movement. So with that being said, I just think it's important. I really do. What more can I say? I mean, the skeptics, if skeptics were in the audience, they probably would agree with that. And I think you kind of got to look at both sides, right? Because if you have an open-minded skeptic across from you, they're going to say something like that. And if you're open-minded as an experiencer, you're going to say, yeah, I can see the value in that, right? And that's kind of all I'm saying here tonight. This has been unapologetically Mr. Rob G. So with that being said, we're going to move into some UFO news.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
All right. UFO and weird news of the week. We had a couple stories that we did last show, And there were some we couldn't get to. So I want to make sure that we cover that tonight, as we have about 7 minutes left in the show. We're going to cover at least, I'd say, 2 of these. So let me pick this one here. There's a man that was creeped out by an eerie discovery after putting his sea monkeys underneath a microscope. A man who got sea monkeys said that he felt creeped out by a discovery he made when he started putting his little aquatic pets under the microscope. You all know what sea monkeys are, and it's very possible that you had some as a pet at some point. They don't live especially long in the grand scheme of things, so any of you that had these as a child are long dead now. I once had sea monkeys for a couple of years after getting them as a birthday gift, but eventually the biggest of them started hogging all of the food, and it left the others and its own babies to starve to death. Then it died of what I can only assume was a combination of loneliness and old age. Anyhow, YouTuber Pika Cosmos got some sea monkeys and started putting them under the microscope as they grew so he could get a better look at what was going on inside their tank. Keeping several tanks of sea monkeys, he spotted that they were growing gunk and algae from the bottom, which actually turned into an ecosystem the little shrimp creatures could feed from. However, putting his gunk under the microscope showed him something that kind of creeped him out a little bit. What he found wriggling around down there were nematodes, tiny little parasitic roundworms that live all over the world, including beneath the sea monkey tank. They started doing a bit more once they got to be about 6 months old, as they might start fighting over who gets the ladies in the tank. If after about 6 months of having them, you see a pair of sea monkeys stuck together and only one of them has whiskers, then that's a mating pair. You might be able to expect more sea monkeys in the future. If there's anything you ought to be creeped out by when it comes to sea monkeys, it's the man who invented them, one Harold von Brandt. As well as deciding the sea monkeys would be a great children's present, he also invented a number of other gifts for kids, including X-ray specs, a monster card that grew hair when you put it in the water, and the invisible goldfish, which was just an empty fish bowl and some fish food. The inventor of sea monkeys being a massive... Okay, he was a white supremacist, according to this. Wasn't something he even tried to hide. When he asked about an interview, he once said, "You know what side I'm on. I don't make any bones about it." So, okay, that was the sea monkey story. Had a little dark ending there. Let's get into this one here, which is the pelvic floor expert shares reason why you should never wipe more than 3 times when going for a poo. Oh, great, a poo story. They say 3 is the magic number, and apparently this even applies to your toilet activities too. According to this pelvic floor expert, anyone wiping their arse several times after going to the bathroom is asking for trouble. But don't worry, as she's got the perfect advice that should save your tush before it's too late. Georgia Rupert Allen, who co-founded the Pelvic Health Wellness Store in Bien, Australia, explained that although people think performing multiple wipes means they have made sure they're cleaned up properly, it's actually not the case. And as an expert in women's health and pelvic floor psychotherapy, this woman knows what she's talking about. Talking to TikTok, she explained that not only will wiping no more than 3 times save you a ton of toilet paper, but it will also prevent you from experiencing some pretty uncomfortable stuff. So it's a win-win. In her viral video, Georgia said, "Do you wipe more than 3 times when you go for a poo? If so, listen up." Quote, "When you are wiping more than 2 or 3 times, that is called fecal smearing. It essentially is when too much fecal matter stays at the entrance of the even after you have finished your poo. Not exactly pleasant stuff, we know, but important all the same." The pelvic floor specialist explained that hope is not lost for those who reckon 3 wipes is not enough either, as she has the perfect solution for you to reduce your current number. Georgia continued, "A technique you can use to reduce the number of times you wipe is by squeezing your pelvic floor in a waterfall formation. So start by squeezing the 20%, and then 50%, and then 80%, and then 100%, so that you have squeezed it 4 times at the end of your poo, the expert explained. This can help close off which is the reason why you are having little bits of stool hanging on the entrance. It is normally weakness from that external. But this isn't always the thing to blame. As Georgia explained, it could be down to other health issues such as hemorrhoids or any scar tissue. Which we're talking about booties. All right, any scar tissue around the too. If her trick doesn't work, she advised anyone watching to go get checked out by a medical professional just to be on the safe side. Although people were left a little grossed out, social media users praised Georgia for sharing advice online and flooded the comment section with her thoughts. One bravely admitted, "This is the content I've been looking for." A second wrote, "Oh my God, that's so interesting." A third joked, "My problem is I'm hairy as Chewbacca. It's like wiping peanut butter off a Persian rug." While a fourth wrote, "Why did this have to come up when I'm in the process of going to the restroom?" Obviously, you do have what you do in the privacy of your own bathroom, but if you're consistently wiping more than thrice, maybe you should take George's advice. Yeah, that was definitely a weird story. Pretty gross. And yeah, pretty gross. But anyways, great show tonight. Do appreciate Wild Trees for coming on in. That is some weird, that should be called the weird and nasty news of the week. Because I think both of those stories were actually pretty gross. But yeah, with that being said, I do want to thank everybody for coming on in. Everybody's jumping in the chat and they're loving that kind of talk. Wow. Radio audience, I don't know how you feel about it. Let me know. Come on over to youtube.com/@spacedoutradio and leave a comment on the video. But I'll read you some of the things they're saying in the chat here. Love be love. Dr. Love is saying dude wipes fragrance free are not flushable and none are. So they're saying basically you could use wipes, which I've heard that as well, but they're not good for the sewer system for sure. And yeah, just a lot of poo talk in the chat tonight. Okay, well, that's expected, right? First call says that's side effects from alien probes. Yeah, I know. Gross story, but that's how we're going to end off the night. I definitely want to thank everybody for coming on out tonight. This has been a fun time. And like I said, tomorrow we will be not here, but we will be running a replay. So I want to thank Wes Decker because he dropped a super chat for us, supporting Spaced Out Radio. We also want to thank the guy that you hear playing right here, Mr. Ron Mumblefoot Thal, because he's telling us to never say never again, right? Yes, the phenomena is definitely real. Anything and everything is possible. So make sure you show your love tonight, hit the like button, and also put your horns up. Also, we want to thank our viewers online and listeners on terrestrial radio and digital platforms, when and wherever in the world you may be listening from. We appreciate you for tuning your frequency to Spaced Out Radio, where we do best. And what's that, you ask? We talk about poo. No, we own the night. Remember, this show is copyrighted Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. It's been a pleasure serving you once again as your host. I'm Mr. Rob G. This is the After Hours Radio Show. And to all you space travelers out there, this is not a goodbye nor a farewell. However, as we go off air for the night, best believe we will see you next time. Much love to everybody and take care. We are clear, and we ended it off with poo in SOR style. Dave Scott would be proud. that we ended the show off with Pooh tonight. Definitely want to thank everybody for coming in. Like I said, live chat will be open tomorrow. So I'll set up a show. I'll pick a really good one for you guys. And you guys can come on in, chat, hang out. And Dave Scott will be in on Monday. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate you guys showing up here at the After Hours Radio Show. You guys all take care. Let's rock on out. Hold on. Let's rock on out of here. We're going to do it like this. Here we go.
Cause we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Yeah, we ran out of patience. Boil up with a cold hard hatred. I can feel the vibration. Beat in the streets, it's a new sensation. I wanna break faces on the pavement. I wanna make greatness look complacent. Adrenaline awakened, I can taste it. We can make an impact, grab and then take it. Like a disease, bring them to their knees. Pay for their disease. Just like a weed, spread into the streets. Time to make them bleed. Cause we just want retribution. Let's go light up the darkness. Make true of an empty promise. With God in the weak and harmless. Take to the streets and turn them to a mosh pit. Cause we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution.